Happy Sunday, and welcome back to Retake the Week. Man, it's been one of those slow build-up kind of weeks where there's been some smaller events happening. Quack's been sick. We're waiting for the RMR. Really, we're just sat here, like, feeling the major anticipation starting to build. But no, we've got to sit through a bunch of other stuff first. I mean, there's still Blast World Finals, the endless debate about the Na'Vi era team. Is it the Nera? Is it not? Which things should be counted? Which things shouldn't? I've had a lot of comments recently on videos where people are sharing strange takes, in my opinion, about the whole Na'Vi situation. But what's coming up this week? I mean, on this show, my God, I just had a complete zone out on this show. I'm just going to show off the upcoming segments before we do any promo. We have the Member QnA this week, which is going to be fun. There's always a lot of fun to be had with finding out our personal opinions on things. The small site retake, the tiers going into Blast World Finals, and also the classics, of course. All those classic segments are going to be there for you. This show is, of course, made possible by members. Without members, we'd probably still be doing the show, but it'd be far less interesting and far less worthy of our time. We'd probably miss it more often, I'm going to be honest. I'd be far more willing, to take the Sunday off when you, text message me hungover, like, I don't know if I can make it. I'd be like, I guess I'll go back to sleep, But there'd be a lot more of that if it wasn't for the members and for our love of the game. So members, of course, get access to prospect demos, interviews with members of staff from teams, typically, BTS segments, and the right to vote. So remember, it's not quite land ownership, but it's some kind of financial responsibility, financial burden required for the right to vote in this kingdom. Quacke, you got anything to promo? We got more episodes of your interviews coming, or anything else to look forward to?
The cheating interview that I did finally went up. I don't know if I talked about that last week.
You did.
I did, yeah. I just remembered, yeah. No, I haven't worked this week much. I have been sick. So support my fundraiser so I can afford more nasal spray. I would just like to make clear, I've never tried to cancel an episode because I was hungover. I just want to push it like half an hour. I just want to do that. Just please let us do 11:30 instead of 11. That's just what I want to do. I've never tried to cancel a Sunday because I was too drunk the day before.
You sound real defensive. I think public opinion will be in my favor after this. Yes, it's a sad situation, guys. We need to intervene on Quacke for his drinking. I mean,
I did try to push this episode forward as well because I thought I was going to be fucked up from the fever, but I'm just getting slightly better. But I will sound nasally and I may cough this episode, so do keep that in mind.
Yeah, he's chosen quite a convincing disguise for his hangover today. But let's get right into the Member Q&A. We're going to lead off with a pair of questions from a member who has always asked multiple questions, but we kind of know him and like him, so we let him do it. I think that's kind of the issue. We're too nice to this guy.
Yep.
And his first question, this is XL for those of you who didn't get that. What's your favorite Blast Premier memory? And we had a problem. Those of you who listen to the behind the scenes will realize that we don't give Blast Premier that kind of reverence. I remember favorite Cologne moments, Katowice, major moments. Blast Premier? Not particularly. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go first. I'm just going to use the Blast Paris Major. We decided that was acceptable. And I was in attendance at the Blast Paris Major, which is a way different experience. It doesn't matter how crap the Counter-Strike being played is. If you're there in person, you're going to have fun. Yes, 8 to 10 beers typically helps, but the atmosphere, the vibe, the crowd, the chants, all of that makes it a blast of a time. And that was honestly what made that event so special. The fans, the French fans in Paris, watching Vitality win a major was phenomenal. It was a whale of a time. Honestly, I enjoyed that far more than I would most events just because there was so much passion in the air. Was the Counter-Strike great? No. We all remember the Blast Paris Major. It was one of the most depressing ends to Counter-Strike we could have hoped for. In terms of CSGO, we closed the door with upsets, mid-teams, Gamble Strike from Gamer Legion paying off. It was just kind of lame. But at least the crowd were having an absolute blast. And that's what counts. And that's what makes it my favorite Blast memory. Not Blast Premier, but Blast.
Yep. I can imagine that was good. For me, that's probably my least favorite major. For good reason.
Oh, no, I've got one that's worse. Way worse.
No, yeah, but just because I was so like into why it was broken, like why the seeding was broken, it was so
Right.
blatantly obvious, and it was just like my soul died because we couldn't change it. Like that was probably why it was shit. But honestly, like some of the results I did enjoy, and like some of the upset games are fun. It's fun sometimes. It's just they have to feel earned. It doesn't if you get grandfathered into 3-0, like straight into the legend stage because you beat 3 teams over 4 maps, then it's like yeah, that's not really deserved. Anyway, I just realized Blast Showdown is part of Blast Premier, and there's a very
Okay.
obvious one which I should have picked, and I have just picked. Medisport's run in the spring showdown this year is probably my favorite memory. Then the entire run. If you're gonna pick a highlight, probably when they won Vertigo against Falcons, because that was like I watched every single second of that one. Like every single game, I was writing about it. I was like, hoping. Um, but yeah, that was just insane. And then, they even win Vertigo against Spirit, I think, at the same event. Like in the final game, they win a map. And at that point, I think they were like the only team except for Mouse and Navi who had won a map against Spirit. Like it was the craziest thing. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite memory. They did extremely well in that spring showdown when they beat Falcons, because that was also like, oh, s1mple's back. It's kind of the same thing as now, like s1mple back, and like,
Yeah.
oh, these like scrapping young lads from Sweden are gonna play against s1mple, and that's like a huge thing. And yeah, it was hype all across the nation. But yeah, when they won 13-11, that was great. And then the Spirit game as well. Yeah, they do win. They do win Vertigo 13-8. So yeah, that was probably my favorite Blast memory because Showdown is part of it. Honorable mention, NIP Amkel in this Showdown.
We don't need to think about that. I'm going to ignore the
No,
fact that you
please
brought
don't.
up one of the worst Counter-Strike games ever played. But let's focus in a bit on that Metasport run, because yeah, that was so fun. Like, I was just getting into the whole Metasport hype train with the new roster,
Yeah,
the young guys. I mean, sorry, I just punched my mic on. But yes, the story at that time was really starting to get something going. Like, you're thinking Nilo has been stuck in an academy for a while. We know how talented he is. We know NIP are never going to use him properly, so we're glad he's escaped. He's together with the twins, with another buddy of theirs, young IGL, and it starts clicking, it starts working. Of course, it later gets ripped to shreds for
yep,
seemingly no gain. But at least at that point, we got some excitement. And yeah, beating s1mple in his comeback. Can you like paint a better picture? Like, as a young player, you're like, oh, we're facing s1mple. He's coming back to the game. The beast, the monster, the Undertaker. And you go and just 2-0. It was 2-0, right? It wasn't even a
2-1,
three-mapper. Was
2-1.
it
It
2-1?
was extremely close. They won on the final map, yeah, as
I
you
felt
would
like it was
in a
two
three
close
mapper.
maps, but yeah, you'll probably remember it far better than I do.
I think they had very close maps. If I remember correctly, one of the first ones was overtime. No, the first map they lost. I think it was Mirage or something like that. I'm gonna look this up, but I want to try it from memory. And then they play Overpass and they win 13-4, and Jaquinho went huge. And I remember he closed that with like a 1-on-3 or 1-on-4 or something. He closed that Overpass map 13-4. And then they go into Vertigo and they win 13-11. I think it was like weighing on 11-11, and then it's like, oh shit, they're gonna lose it. Um, like no wait, they went up to 12. They went up to 12, and then it goes to 12-11, and it's like the way the round went, I think they even like lost the opener, and it's like, holy shit, it's falling apart. And then like multi-kill, and it's like, oh, the game is over. And it was just amazing hype. Sitting in a Swedish Twitch channel at that point. But yeah, 13-9 on Mirage, and it's like, the series is over. Good attempt, boys. 13-9 is still respectable, and then they go to Overpass, and it's a 13-4 win. Um,
Yeah.
it was just a crazy sort of back and forth.
Yeah, I guess most of what I remember is that last map then, that super close
Yeah,
13-11 win.
yeah,
But no, at that point, you couldn't be more excited for Metasport. You just couldn't. It was so exciting. Yeah,
yeah.
since then gone downhill, but that's fine. All right, the next
It
question
has
from
since
Excel.
gone on it.
Let's we've managed to figure out some memories for that one.
Yep.
But this question had me more curious. If you had to put kyousuke in any current roster, single swap only, where would you put him? Now, I spoiled my answer in the pre-show, like I basically just said it. But Quack, I'm curious if you have a different one to present, like another place you'd like to see him end up, where he'd make sense.
I can't remember what you said, but what I am gonna say is a team that I think are making roster changes after the RMR. I don't think they make the major. I think they will make at least one move. I think honestly it could be two, and that team is Aurora, because I think they have a lot of problems and they could definitely use Result. Or sorry, they could definitely use kyousuke. because they lost result. They sort of need someone to hit that heavily, you know. And I think, you know, maybe it's Lackey, maybe he comes in for Flax and you rebalance a bit. Whatever happens, I think kyousuke could really breathe some life into that, because I think they are losing Deco. Like, the rumor was that Deco is like, I don't care about Counter-Strike anymore and I'm just gonna retire. Like, that was the rumor, and like, they didn't want Clax. Like, we know they reneged on the deal. Like, they went back on it for the Result Clax swap. Like, Result wanted to leave, and they were like, you can have Clax, and then they went like, no, we don't want Clax, and then eventually it ended up happening anyway. Like, we know they have a lot of roster trouble. They need to like sort of keep this now because they're qualified for the RMR. I think something is going to happen, and I think something that could definitely put them in a good position is if they have a good rifler coming into there, such as kyousuke. So that's pretty much like, I was looking through this, and like, anything else I can think of is a downgrade on Spirit Academy, pretty much. Like, he might just be better off waiting there. But if I'm doing single swap right now, obviously not possible because of the RMR. But you know, in what, 3 weeks time when they're going to be knocked out, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, I see the vision. The problem is, I've already got Kenzie Norway. He has to come in for one of those two guys in terms of the spots you're going to give him. I'm not going to stick him in like Clack spots, in Lackey spots. Like, these would be utterly wasted. And I also think those other guys, like, are pretty high impact riflers. I can only have so many on a team, you know, and I don't think trying the Malbs MD route where, you know, you're taking a star rifler, CT side, sticking him in anchor spots, hoping he can just dominate the other half of the game from like sort of semi-lurk, semi-hard entry sort of roles. I think it's a bit of a wish for them. So I see the vision, but for me, you know what? I'd said it like this: Axile, I'm done. I'm done. Get him out of Cloud9, put in kyousuke. Axile hasn't even played that poorly on Cloud9, right? Like, he's been recently, especially, not that terrible. But you see their results at Thunderpick, you see them going into the RMR, and you're like, they need to make that work. They really do. And ideally, I think adding kyousuke, if they could, before the RMR, would go huge. Like, imagine that. Heavy God, Icy, and kyousuke. Like, Icy, I think, is still a bit fool's gold, but he's still a good AWPer. Like, he's not star level just yet, at least for tier 1, but he's still a solid player. So adding kyousuke alongside that to give them a real aggressive edge, I think would be insane. Like, this guy, about as talented as they come, and yeah, Axile at Thunderpick, a 1.01 rating. Just imagine if Heavy God had some help during that run. They probably beat Fnatic. So that's my big change. I'd want him straight into this Cloud9 roster. Still speaking Russian. I took any non-Russian teams out of the equation. I'm not entertaining that. Just make him go join that team and give Heavy God the hand he needs, because there's a real team brewing there if you had a little more rifle power.
I think that's a very good pick. Sorry, like, again, my fucking audio just shifted to my fucking monitor. Like, suddenly mid-sentence, you were coming out of my monitor speakers.
Your camera's just died.
Yeah, okay, something happened. I'm gonna restart this. Hang on. I'll be back on camera in 1 second. Yeah, something is just fundamentally broken with my PC today. Here I am. I don't know if you maybe need to redo the link or something.
I do need to.
Anyway,
yeah.
Technical difficulties. I think that's a good pick. I think Exile. I love Exile. I think if Exile can do well, I would definitely want to see that happen. But he hasn't really. Well, I mean, he has, but like, you've got to make something big happen with this team, because that's sort of not the investment you have, because I think they've done this relatively cheaply, but they have, like, I think, like, the expectations on Cloud9, the expectations on Boomage, and on Axile, honestly, are significantly bigger than this. So yeah, like, kyousuke is definitely one of those players who can do it. So yeah, not a bad pick at all.
Yeah, I mean, mechanically, about as perfect as you can be as a player, honestly. Watching him play, absolutely insane. So that's my pick, yeah. That's, honestly, I think both those options are good for him, because one's like less pressure if he goes to Aurora. But no, I think the Cloud9 move, if I had to put him anywhere right this second to just fix a team, that should be better. It's that one. Our next question comes from Snasnay196. Now, she has asked, I say she, I pretend I don't know who this is. They have asked, whoa, who's your favorite member and why? Shout out, please. So, Quacke, who's your favorite member and why?
It's me because it's me. I cannot pick a favorite.
Am I
I'm gonna
supposed
be
to
the
be the egotist here? Like, how can you pick yourself? Come on, you're supposed to be the
no.
humble
I'm
king.
I'm gonna be the very nice person and say I cannot pick a favorite. I think we both make up an equal part of this show, an equally great part of this show. So now whatever you say, which isn't that, you will sound like a dick.
Well, I'm picking a member here, not one of us.
Oh, a member.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
the
you meant like a
question.
member of the
Who's your
show.
favorite
I thought you meant like
member?
a member of the show. That's you or me.
No,
Okay.
channel member, obviously.
I don't know. I think me. Yeah, I think me.
Still outrageous, but that's
I'm gonna
fine.
pick myself. Yeah, I'm gonna pick myself there. Yep.
Now, because this member may or may not be in the room and also dating me, I'm going to have to say, Snake196, you are definitely my favorite member. We've got little hands waving in the background.
The nepotism on this show, it's crazy, honestly.
Is it nepotism? Is it, or is it? I'm going to stop there because I can make so many inappropriate jokes right now.
Yep.
Yeah, let's keep it PG-13. Just say yeah. Great hugger. Next, we have a question from Zedbutnotdead. And this one interests me a lot. I saw this question. It's
Also,
like, yes, it's not a Counter-Strike question, but it's a question I get to answer in great descriptive detail if I want to. So they have simply asked, can we get y'all's top 5 favorite movies? Now, Quacke, I was thinking, I've got a couple honorable mentions I want to just throw out before I got into my
yep.
list. So I think I'd just give my
Yep.
honorable mentions, then you can kick us off. Unless you have
You want to
honorable
go like
mentions
one for
too.
one for you and me because we might have some of the same, and then we can like.
Yeah, if when we go through it. So just
Yeah.
honorable mentions. These are
Yeah,
two
I don't have any.
movies that it actually pained me to not call like in my top 5 favorites. But I'm like, yeah, I guess like if I had to pick one of these to rewatch, I wouldn't put these immediately. So those are the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is my favorite Wes Anderson movie. Like, absolutely adored that movie when it first came out. I've rewatched it a couple times since. Like every time I need to pick a movie to watch, I'm like, that's always gonna be right there. And the other one is Interstellar, which I watched rather late, like only like last year, I think, in cinema though. I watched it, but still, I hadn't. When it came out, I didn't see it for years and years. I never watched it. I heard so many good things about it. Finally watched it, and yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, that many people couldn't be wrong. But right, let's get into the actual 5. Take us away. What have you got? These are not in order, by the way. We both agreed we wouldn't do them as like an actual ranking. These are just if we had to pick 5 favorite movies, where would we go?
Yeah, and it's favorite. It's not greatest. Like we have I have specifically tried to pick like movies that set high for me for some reason, not because they are the greatest movie of all time. Like if I wanted to go through a cinema masterclass, I think there's 2 or 3 movies here which wouldn't make it onto the list. But I'm gonna start with one which you might have, which is Empire Strikes Back.
I do not, but all right.
Right.
Yeah, there's no Star Wars on my list.
It is the best Star Wars movie. Like it is, almost objectively. It's also just a great movie. Like you can just throw it on. You don't necessarily need to do like the marathon where you watch the first and the second and the third. You can literally just throw on Empire Strikes Back, enjoy it, and then like just have a good time. It is. I think it is a great movie. Like there's every time I watch it, I notice like different things that I didn't notice before, and I'm like, that's really good. That's really clever, especially for like an early '80s movie. And there's just something about the vibe, you know, like with it is '80s, but it's in space. So I do enjoy that movie quite a lot.
Yeah, I've watched it once when I was like, I want to say 9.
Mm-hmm.
And like my dad tried to get me and like my best friend from primary school to like watch the original trilogy because he loves them. He had them on like videotape on VHS. I kind of fell asleep. That was not the age to do that. It's like the first time he showed me a different movie that's on this list. I was like, I was too young. My attention span wasn't there. I didn't give enough of a shit about cinema at that point for you to show me this. So I do actually need to say, I need to rewatch the original trilogy. Like I've seen 1, 2, 3 obviously in cinema as a kid, and I unfortunately saw 7, 8, 9 as an adult, which physically tortured me and made me suicidal. So glad I never have to rewatch those. Sorry to anyone who enjoyed episode 9 especially. I'm looking at a very specific member of my family who said it was good when we walked out the cinema. You're lucky I didn't throw you in front of a bus because that was dreadful.
I
Yeah.
remember I enjoyed it when I watched it, but then like a week later when I thought about it a bit and I looked at it on YouTube a bit and I was like, yeah, that was kind of bullshit. Like, what was that about? But yeah, my sister has never watched Star Wars and or had never watched Star Wars because now we have watched through like all of the first 6 movies, and I was like, we can stop here, and you do not have to watch anything else because nothing else. There are a few things that are worth watching. The sequel trilogy is not one of them. Like, we can stop here. Like, and she was like, yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no.
yeah.
No, that was bad. But all right. For me, it's just going to go bottom to top of the list I've written, even though it's not in order. The Lobster. Do you know this movie?
I do not know this movie. What is
All right,
this
let
movie?
me remember the names that are involved so that I'm not lying. Because I have to remember. So it's Colin Farrell of In Bruges.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. It's directed by some guy I've never heard of before watching this movie, Yorgos Lanthimos. It's it's a very strange sort of dystopian. Like you'd think science fiction, but it's not actually like sci-fi in any way. It's just sort of a alternate reality based movie that's an incredibly dark comedy. Like dark comedy. It's hilarious as someone who enjoys dark humor, but it's also objectively like I'm not going to show this to an 11-year-old because there's some really dark stuff in there, like really dark. So no, it's one of my favorite movies. As in, like I watched it, expected nothing. I just
Mm.
saw like when you look at the cover of like the DVD, it's like Rachel Weisz, Colin Farrell, The Lobster. You're like, what kind of weird art house like rom com is this? And then, but then my mum was like, oh, we couldn't get through it. It was so disturbing. And I was like, definitely going to give that a shot. Then put it into the DVD player, watched it, and yeah, I've rewatched it a couple times since. It's one of those things where I wait a long time before I bring it up to anyone and try to make them watch it. So I got to make sure they're actually the right kind of person. But I think you should
Mm.
give it a try. I loved it, and yeah, it made my top 5 favorites.
Watch listed. Yeah.
Mm.
I can't
Right.
comment anymore on that. I haven't seen it.
No, that's what
uh,
some of these are going to be awkward to have a back and forth on if only one person's seen it. I can only rant so long before I start giving away plot points. But yeah, definitely give that a watch.
yeah, I'm gonna go for another movie then, which is probably my equivalent of The Lobster, because I'm assuming this it's big actors. I'm assuming this was still a decently big operation. I'm gonna go for, but maybe not like one of the big, great, like huge box office movies. I'm gonna go. This probably still was. I'm gonna go for Baby Driver. If you have ever seen it
Oh
with
yeah, I've
Edgar
seen
Wright.
that.
Edgar Wright's
I've
Baby
seen
Driver.
that.
It is the bigger movie than I'm trying to make it out here now. But yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty
it's a
big.
great movie. I watched it in 2017. I was really hyped for it. I love music and I love cars, and I was like, oh, so this is what Edgar Wright does, and it's really awesome. Like it's really fucking awesome. And I watched it several times. It's a really good movie. For those who don't know, I don't know how popular this movie actually is. It is a movie about
Fairly.
basically. It is a movie about basically the gist of it is it's a getaway driver and he has tinnitus and he listens to music to like drown out the noise of the crime that he's regretfully participating in, and also to drown out his tinnitus. And like he has like this fixation to do everything like to a rhythm of the music, which is sometimes funny and sometimes just really fucking cool. And then it's also a
Yeah,
really great movie because like he ends up in a lot of trouble with these criminals that are robbing banks and shit. um Really good movie. Ansel Elgort, Kevin Spacey, just before all the shit, just before all the shit happened. So you
yeah,
you can watch this in good conscience. Lily James, who I think was in some other things. Jamie Foxx has a
yeah. I
has
was
a
about to
has a
say
good role.
there's a smaller role for Jamie Foxx, but he's in there as well.
Yeah, but it's iconic. Like it's really him,
Yeah, it
and
is.
I
It
really
is.
like that. Yeah, and just a really good soundtrack, extremely good soundtrack. And there's like it's these things that I've since learned since this was the first time I heard about Edgar Wright, but it's these things that I've since heard that Edgar Wright does, which is like where he really ties visuals into the music, and like there's a bunch of small details that you might not notice, but then you notice them afterwards. Like I can point one out now, which if you watch it and you haven't watched it before, and you are gonna notice this, there is at one point where they play the song which I think is Harlem Shuffle.
Yeah,
It's basically
I've
when
seen the movie.
he's going to get the coffee for this crime gang. Um, on the way there, they play the original Harlem Shuffle, and it's like really upbeat, and like everything's going well. On the way back, everything is a bit more, stuff is going wrong, and they play a more, I don't know if it's minor key, but it's a much more like it isn't as uppity. Like it's not
Yeah,
as good mood of the same song. It's a cover of the same song, and that's like ooh, very cool. I do really like that. So yeah. Good music and good movie.
Yeah, Baby Driver's a Edgar Wright classic. He's such a stylized director. Like everything he does has a lot of style. Like throughout the movie, you'll see running, just like I guess you could call them creative ideas that just are consistently like repeated, done. In his the thing that brought him firstly to infamy in the at least British cinema scene. I didn't realize that movies like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead weren't a huge deal outside of the UK. So every time I bring it up to people and they're like, "What the fuck is Hot Fuzz?" and I'm like, "You've not seen Hot Fuzz?" But yeah, these like that movie was like the match cuts, the like callback dialogue, how every single line in the movie, like the script was so perfectly written, not a single line was wasted. Like these sorts of things are really what make Edgar Wright movies Edgar Wright movies. He obviously also made Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is a bit of a like a cult indie sort of classic at this point. Despite being massively popular, it's a certain demographic. That's why I call it like sort of more cult than anything else. But no, Edgar Wright, Baby Driver, he very much locks in on this idea of like the music and the action and everything being hit on beat and all this sort of stuff, and it's incredibly stylish. So no, I did enjoy that movie. I watched it with family the first time I'd ever seen it, and when I realized it was Edgar Wright, I was like, oh, that all makes sense now. Like everything being so on the nose on this idea that he has. That's very Edgar Wright, and it's great. It's fun to see a director that has such a style, and a uniqueness about the way they do their movies. Like I do enjoy that. So no, that's a great pick in my eyes. Maybe I would have picked a different Edgar Wright movie because I grew up with Hot Fuzz, and that movie is just legendary. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. Specifically, you Quacke, you need to go watch that film as well. But all right, my next pick. This is where we start getting towards the more like wankery side of my picks, but I don't care. I've picked The Master by Paul Thomas Anderson. There's a lot of movies that Joaquin Phoenix is amazing in, but this is perhaps the first one that made me like really give a shit. Like he's great in Gladiator, he's good in Joker, like he's good in a bunch of stuff, but The Master, I think The Master's his best performance that I've watched. And the movie around it, the visuals, the story, like the performances by people like Philip Seymour Hoffman, also just amazing. It's very character led, and the narrative kind of seems to loop by the end of the movie. And it's all one big kind of veiled critique of Scientology, but more importantly, it's just a really interesting, somewhat dark, but very entertaining sort of character study of a broken alcoholic, and it's very fun. I'm going to be honest, to watch, despite its dark nature. A lot of these things I'm going to realize is a trend with me. It's like the movies I like are kind of dark, but I really enjoy them for no other reason than like the dark humor that you find in these terrible, like, twisted scenarios. I seem to just make me laugh a little harder. Like, the fact that it is despite certain amounts of bleakness, darkness, the fact that there is still comedy, for me, is always a great part of these films. And no, I'm not going to spoil too much about the plot, too much about who the characters are, because I just want people to watch these movies. I don't want to talk too much about it. Have you seen this yourself? I recommend it. Have you ever watched anything from Paul Thomas Anderson? Like There Will Be Blood, Boogie Nights, Licorice Pizza?
No. Oh, I want to watch Magnolia. I've had this on my list for a while.
Yeah.
It's like the next movie I watch is probably going to be Magnolia because I've had it on like the top of my list for so long.
Yeah, and for me, my next one from him is Phantom Thread. I've had that poised, just ready to go on the watch list as well. Just need to find the time, unfortunately. Between the jobs, it's kind of difficult. But yeah.
Yeah.
Take it away, next pick.
That's a respectable pick. I'm going to go for... I'm going to end the list on very cheery picks, like very... more fun picks, but I'm going to go for Dark Knight, which is why I said that some of my picks on this list are very much like a guy's movie list.
You said that, yeah.
Yeah, I've watched it like 13 times. It is an amazing movie, and like I don't need to say why, because I feel like if you don't agree with what I just said, like there's no point in me reiterating. You already like it's the same thing that everybody says. It's all of the actors are great, like story is great, the soundtrack's great, like everything is like oh perfect. Like it's very few complaints to have about this movie, I think, but it's just very fun. I think it's just a very fun time. Like it's a very fun time watching this movie for me.
Yeah.
Heath Ledger's great. I think Christian Bale is great. I think he plays a great Batman. I don't know if people who like really like Batman might not think that Christian Bale is like the best Batman or anything, because I know that's like something that you know people who really enjoy Batman specifically. I'm not like one of those. I just enjoy this for a great movie. I think it's the only Batman movie I've seen. So it's like I don't really care about the fact that he's Batman. I care about the fact that Christian Bale does a good job. So
Mm.
yeah, Michael Caine also great in his role. Gary Oldman great in his role. Like everybody's just doing really good, like in this movie, and like it's put together perfectly. And then Hans Zimmer is on top of it, and it's yeah, it's a modern classic. Well, it's about to be a classic. Just I think we are getting older, and this is since
Oh
2008.
yeah, it's
But yeah.
16 years old. I mean, it's far from being a classic yet, but it's approaching modern classic, I'd say. But
Yep.
it's a movie I watched a dozen times when I was like 10 to 13, sort of thing. Not so much recently, but that doesn't really matter. I think everything you said is fair. Like the performances, the direction, like the action, everything is so gripping. No, it's not even a superhero movie. Like that's the idea. But to be fair, the
Yeah.
idea of Batman is that he is realistically he's basically a detective who happens to have a bunch of fun gadgets. Like he's always been so good, like as a character, to put into different sort of genres. Like he's always a little bit different. Like Superman, you kind of have to make a superhero movie. Batman, you're essentially making like noir crime thrillers that happen to have a dude in a mask. So no, that's one of the best
Yeah.
examples of it. It's like a mafia crime movie. From the police's perspective, but the policeman is a rogue nutcase with a bunch of body armor. So no,
Yeah.
very good movie. Deserved a lot of the plaudits. Sometimes, yeah, I don't think when I see it like reach like people's like all-time greats, like top 3 movies, I'm like, chill out. But I can give it as a favorite easily. There's gonna be a lot of people's favorites in it for good reason. Yeah, no, great movie. Up next, we're keeping on the wanker sort of train for me. I assume it's The Northman. You watched that?
No idea. No idea. No,
So
you're picking very much out of my sphere movies.
So it's more recent. It's Robert Eggers, the director, and it's who plays the lead character. It's one of
Alexander
those.
Skarsgård,
I
probably.
was about to say one of the Skarsgårds, one of those brothers.
Mm.
But yeah, it's
I just said
got
that in a very weird English and Swedish mix. Alexander Skarsgård is his name. I
that guy,
apologize to my
that fella,
brethren. Yeah.
that big fucker. No, it's I don't really want to explain much about it. It's one of those movies again where I'm like, if you can, go see it in a cinema. If you can, like, go sit there, absorb the visuals. It's a simple story, but properly told, with some delightful violence to throw in. It's not like an action movie all throughout, but there's a good amount of bloodshed. It is an old Norse tale that's been essentially retold, but without making it a modern retelling of this sort of bullshit. It's basically the original story, just with nice visuals and probably some things added in to make it almost 2.5 hours. But no, it's got a small cameo from Willem Dafoe that I think is fun, because Robert Eggers and Willem Dafoe worked so well together on the Lighthouse that it made sense to have him in this movie, but he couldn't really play a main character, so he's got a little bit of a cameo that's appreciated. And yeah, I'd recommend it massively. And if anyone else is excited for Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers remake coming out this year, let me know in the comments. I will be, of course, attending screenings of that as soon as I can.
Yeah.
Have you
Probably
ever
a
watched
good pick.
anything from Robert Eggers as well?
I don't think so. Let me check.
The
I'm very
Lighthouse,
bad
The
at.
Northman, Nosferatu's coming out. The
I've
Witch is
wanted
what
to
he
watch
first
The
kind of broke out.
Lighthouse. I've wanted to
The
watch The
Lighthouse
Lighthouse
is
as well.
so good, but it's like very, it's slightly disturbing, slightly haunting, and the things you
Yeah.
watch these two men do, like it's
It's not always that I'm like up for that sort of thing. That's sort of
you
why I
have to
put
be
this.
up for it. Yeah.
That's why I put this sort of movies off, because like sometimes I feel like I could have a great time if I put this movie on, or it could ruin my entire evening. Like it's a 50-50, and sometimes
Yeah.
like more often than not I don't want to go for that gamble, even if like the reward is great. It's like I would rather put on something which is like more I will enjoy this. Like,
Do you know what my cheat code is for those movies? I watch
what?
them first thing in the morning.
That's probably a good idea. I have
Yeah.
done. This is a pro tip for any of you who like me have like one Discord chat of friends which you hang out in, and like you just like as you go about your day, studying or gaming or whatever you do, you just sort of hop into voice chat now and again and just talk to each other, which has been great habit for me keeping up with friends. Do you Discord watch parties? Because you said this sounds like a horrible idea. I watched the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy just recently, and all of them were done between like 9 a.m. Like we start watching at 9 a.m. and we finish at like 1 p.m. And like all of them, we did that for all three of the movies, and it was great because like everybody's sitting there, we all have our cup of coffees, we have made some sort of breakfast, and we're just like talking, and it was really great. It's like, yeah, that was great. Honorable mention, probably could have made my list as well. Pretty much any out of those movies because those were great. I
Yeah,
hadn't watched them
fair.
before, so
But yeah,
yeah.
I did that with Mandy, and that was needed. I think if I watched Mandy with the lights off and it dark outside, I would have struggled to finish it just because it's fucking visually sometimes haunting, horrifying, very stunning. Yeah, Mandy's also an underrated pick that people should go check out. But yeah, that's the Northman and my Robert Eggers promo. Who you got? What have you got coming up next?
Now this is where I get into
This could be
more
the
like
longest segment on the entire show, but I don't give a shit. This is
welcome to
self-indulgent.
Retake the Reel of Film in the Cinema.
That's
Yeah,
why
okay.
timestamps exist, guys. Like, this is why timestamps
Yeah,
exist.
yeah. Although idea for a segment, movie club. All right. This is this is where I get a bit more like goofy in my picks, but I have picked up my favorite movie when I was a kid, and still a really great movie. I think it's an amazing movie. It's Cars, Pixar's Cars.
Oh,
I watched it
bloody hell.
a billion times when I was a kid. I could recite every single line of dialogue from memory when I was a kid. I could do that. I could sit at the dinner table and recite every single line from this movie. Like I could do that for 2 hours. I could do it because I just love this movie. I love cars, and I think sorry, I think this movie is just great. It's a great movie. Um, and like I've showed it to like older relatives because there's some car people in my family, and like I've showed it to some older relatives, and they're like, "Yeah, this is a great movie." Like they enjoyed this movie. It's just filled with like I don't know. I think it like made me into a guy who kind of likes cars. Not the movie, but like the objects. And also the music is really great. Like as an adult now that I'm watching, I'm like, ooh, nice. This is some really good Brad Paisley and like some really good, you know, Rascal Flatts covering a Tom Cochrane song. Real Gone, underrated pick. Like yeah, it's anyway. I just think it's an amazing movie. It's the best Pixar movie if I had to pick anyone. Growing up in the sort of generation that I do, I think you need to have a favorite Pixar movie pretty much as a kid at least. And this was the one I had, and I do still love it a lot. So yeah, that's my pick.
Okay, a movie I haven't actually watched,
Are
honestly.
you kidding me? You haven't watched Cars?
No, it came out when I was 9, and as a kid, I didn't watch a lot of TV, a lot of movies. Like, I played sports. I had a Game Boy, and that was the limit of my gaming for like a decade. Like, I wasn't
This is the
that
most
nerdy a
fraudulent
kid.
show
Like,
going. Like, this is a show about professional gaming, and you you didn't play video games as a kid.
I
Is that
did. I
what you're
played
telling me?
Game Boy because some of us didn't
Ah,
have
okay.
gaming PCs at home. I had a
Yeah. So for our
DS
next
when it
segment,
came
we will
out.
be talking
Like,
about this week's speed run of Super Mario Brothers.
no, that's going to be
Sorry,
rather long. But
sorry,
yeah,
I'm taking the piss. I'm taking the piss. I have a question. If you watch this movie now, do you think you could take it serious if you watched it as an adult? Or do you
no,
think you would
I
or do you think
cannot.
it would be or
I
do you
can.
think it would be like when you see like when you had a younger sibling watching a kids show and it's like and they really liked it and you could be like, yeah, I can see why, but like I just can't sit here without like almost getting uncomfortable because it's
The
like
problem is that it's cars. I
okay.
have seen too many ka-chow memes to take cars seriously. Like,
Oh my fucking
I
god. Yeah,
can't
okay.
take it seriously at all. So no, I appreciate the history you have with it. I just can't
I
ever
respect
see
that.
it seriously.
I respect that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this
Great movie.
isn't. This is my next pick. We're throwing back to what I said earlier about my dad showing me
Sorry.
movies at the wrong
Just really
time.
quickly, drop in the comments which is the best Cars movie. Is it 1, 2, or 3? Because this is an endless point of debate, and I think it's a generational issue. Carry
With
on.
who? But anyway, right. So I brought this up earlier, but this is the movies. So I've cheated. I decided I was going to cheat because these are favorite movies. I put both Blade Runners here because I loved both. But the problem is, my dad showed me the original Blade Runner, when I was like 14, like peak ADHD. And I'm talking the first 45 minutes of that movie, you have to be really locked in and listening and like observing the visuals. There's no action. You have to like appreciate what they're doing. And I just couldn't. And I just left off. I was like, Dad, I'm kind of bored. I'm going to go play games. So I just left. I couldn't watch it. But then many years later, Blade Runner 2049 comes out. And I go and watch that in the cinema. And I come out of that movie, I was like, holy shit, that was cool. Like, that was so cool. And that's Denis Villeneuve, like his visual style and all that stuff. Ryan Gosling's performance is actually one of his best, I think. One of his most emotive, despite also being a robot with no emotions, borderline literally in the movie. Impressive work, I know. But yeah, most of what really made me enamored with the movie was the visual style. Like, I just loved how it looked. And then I was like, okay, let's give the original Blade Runner a shot. Because at that point, I considered that movie my favorite movie. So I went and watched the original Blade Runner. I was like, oh, I get it. I fucking get it. Like, this is so good. And it's such good sci-fi as well. So no, I can't choose which one I prefer. That's why I've put them both here, because the original Blade Runner does have its eccentricities of being a movie from 1980 something. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of the way things look, the costume design, the weird gymnastics segment. Y'all know, if you've seen the movie, what I mean. Kind of dated stuff that slightly throws me off, but nothing will ever beat as a closing scene Tears in Rain. Like an end to a character arc. Never has been better done. So the two of them kind of battle it out for me. So I just put them here together because I'm a big fan of both. But no, I get it. I get it, Dad. The original Blade Runner was amazing. It was amazing. And Deckard was not a replicant. Fuck the director's cut. Anyway. Have you seen either one of these?
No, but I wanna. This is very high on my watch list as well because I think this would be exactly up my alley. I think it would be.
The original or the second? The technically
Both. I think
sequel.
both would be. I think both would be.
Okay.
But yeah, no. I don't know. I don't know a lot about this movie. I just know one of the things I have, which is like when I learned that Blade Runner is not a character, is when Elon Musk, he said a funny thing when he talked about the Cybertruck, and like he
Yeah.
said, it's the kind of thing that Blade Runner would drive, and then like everybody who's actually seen the movie knows that that's
It's
not a character in the
well,
movie.
it's
Yeah,
a
it's
Blade Runner, dude. My God.
yeah, and like he has obviously not watched the movie. Anyway, yeah, it's
I was about to go grab the book that it's based on, but I'd have to run. Actually, you can chat. It's your next pick. I'm gonna go grab the book. I'm gonna try.
yeah, okay,
Hide who's on the
good
sofa.
choice. Okay, my next pick. I'm gonna have to repeat what I'm about to say. My next pick for a favorite movie is
This book.
there's the book. There's the book. That looks like a good book. It looks like a classic. It's probably a very good book. Anyway, my next pick for a favorite movie. I would like to repeat. This is a favorite movie, and it's gonna be Top Gun. And this is another one which, like, yes, my dad showed me the movie, and like,
Yeah.
when I grew up with this movie, I thought it was a really good movie. And honestly, to this day, I think there are few movies which, like, without taking themselves too seriously, like, without being like, oh, this is a really profound quote, there are few movies who have as quotable dialogue as Top Gun, like, in the world, without being like very profound and being like very philosophical and like very serious. So, because there are just so many lines, I feel like almost every single line is like something you could throw into another context and be very funny with. Like the one my dad always runs with is like the one where like I don't know if you've seen the movie, the one where he's about to get shipped off to Top Gun, the flight school, and like the chief of the aircraft carrier is like, if you screw up just this much, I'll have you throw in a cargo plane out of Hong Kong full of rubber dog shit. That's the quote. And it's like, oh, funny. That's really funny. Yeah, it's just like people kind of make fun of this. People have criticism of this movie because it's like, oh, it symbolizes like the American military. It's American military propaganda. Yeah, it was. It was funded by the U.S. Navy. Like it
Yeah,
was.
but it's a banger.
It's a banger. Like it's a fucking banger. It has planes.
Oh,
I think few
it's like
movies. Maybe the only movie which beats it in this regard is the sequel. But like in terms of practical effects, they got so like they have actual
mm,
U.S. Navy pilots flying actual U.S. Navy planes, and like it's awesome. It's a fucking awesome movie. But yeah,
yeah. My mum actually showed this to me when I was a kid. Like when I was
yeah.
like 10, 11, and I don't remember much of it. I remember. I mean, I've since then remembered the incredibly homoerotic volleyball scene, which I mean, we all love some
Another
topless
criticism
dudes.
of the movie, yes.
We all love topless dudes. Come on, come on. Who doesn't love seeing some wet, glistening muscles in the
Yeah, and then
sand?
Goose still has the T-shirt on. I imagine that was a funny, funny thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember some of the action scenes a bit. Like I get why it gets its credit. I get why people love it. I haven't watched it since I was a kid, and I didn't watch Maverick. I didn't watch the sequel.
I think
So
the
yeah,
thing about Maverick is I watched it in theaters and I was like, okay, it was sort of the same thing that I felt after like Rise of Skywalker or like the last Spider-Man movie, which was called something, whatever it was, and I was like,
Homecoming, No Way Home. There's those that they got home names. I
it
remember.
would have been No Way Home in that case because I think Far From Home was the second one. Anyway, it was sort of that thing where I was like sitting there and I was like, this is amazing, but I think I'm gonna feel differently about it when I think about it. Like it's very much like a bit in your face. So then I watched it like when it came out on streaming, and I was like, I understand now. Like it's not as because both of those movies I then thought were shit when I thought about them
Yeah,
afterwards, like both Rise of Skywalker and the Spider-Man movie. This one was more like I still like this movie. I still like watching this movie, and it's still awesome. It's just a bit too much, I think, because like the Top Gun sort of hits the sweet spot about like the outrageous stuff which happens, and then
yeah. Action and
I'm a
character. Yeah,
yeah, I'm a nerd. I like planes. I like planes. I like cars. I like pretty much the only thing I don't like is trains because I'm not that autistic. Like it's like for me some of these things is like it's a bit over the top. Like you wouldn't do this shit in an actual fighter jet. And then it's like the enemy is doing this and it's like who's the enemy? You could have just said China. Like you could have just done that. Like
yeah. Just say
yeah.
it. Just we all
Just
know we're
say
all
it. Just say
gearing
it.
up. World War III is going to happen in one of two
Yeah.
places: the Middle East or the South China Sea. Like, just make an assertion. Like,
Just
pick which
pick
one
one.
your coin landed on. Like,
You're gonna lose box office. I mean, it's cheaper if you pick Iran, I suppose. Like,
yeah, much cheaper. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Anyway, no, it's I just think the original Top Gun is really great. It hits a sweet spot in some sense where like I don't know, the cinematography is pretty cool because you have like some scenes where like oh he's like sitting on the motorbike at the end of the runway and then like all the plane comes in for a landing and you're like Jesus Christ, I wish I could have been there for filming day. That would have been awesome. Um, and then you have like everybody. It's not necessarily that every line is quotable, but every single line is delivered in a way where like I feel like it is. Like I feel like I could say "Woo, splash one," and it's like that could have been a quote, but it isn't a quote. It means nothing. Like it means absolutely nothing. But it's like the delivery, something just feels really good about it. So yeah, that's my
Right.
fifth pick. I like Top Gun.
Fair. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
And for my final pick, it's a pick that's as predictable, I think, as the sun rises when two dudes talk about favorite movies, especially from our age. But these are movies I watched as a kid and loved, watched as a teenager and loved more, and then watched as an adult and somehow even more. Like, I loved it even more. Uh, it's the Lord of the Rings trilogy extended edition.
Ah.
Like,
Hmm.
caveat: if you haven't ever seen it, don't watch the extended edition first because there's the pacing's better if you've never seen it to watch it without the extended stuff. But the extended stuff is awesome if you're a fucking nerd. So that's the balance. But no, the extended editions are amazing. I frequently will watch them back to back in their entirety. I've done it in a cinema. I've done it in a random school's gymnasium that we kind of semi broke into to use their projector. Yeah, we knew a guy who had some keys and we snuck in there. Technically wasn't allowed, but it happened and it was very fun. But no, the Lord of the Rings movies, if I go back now, I always notice the CGI mistakes and the issues in the action sequences, the way they're shot, and all this other crap. Like, the fight scenes are very cut heavy, not too well choreographed. But I don't care because it's an epic, and the point of an epic is the story of the characters and the things they overcome and all that other, basic storytelling. It's not about how good the action scenes are. And this movie, talk
Yeah.
about quotable dialogue. Quotable dialogue. I've referenced Lord of the Rings quotes in just random Counter-Strike videos when doing analysis. Like, that's how perfect it is. They took Tolkien's work, technically changed a lot, but did it in such a true to the original source material way that it feels like it was just a screenplay written by Tolkien adapting his own work. Like, almost. I mean, we know he'd he'd write it in a far longer, more flowery way. The movies would last 9 hours each. Probably there'd be like 1,500 descriptions of the tree they're standing next to, but still, it'd be epic. So no, I love these movies. They make me feel a certain type of way. And if I show you these movies and you take your phone out, I will throw you through a window. So be warned. Like, these are my religion. Like, put the Bible away and open up the Fellowship of the Ring, because that's where it all begins.
Yeah. Like I said, I saw these movies over the last couple of weeks, and I did watch the extended edition first because everybody said I should. And
Technically,
I thought it was fine.
spoiler.
I thought it was fine. The pacing was fine. I really enjoyed them. I think the final one, Return of the King,
Yep.
I was like, this definitely could have made my top 5. But I also did feel like it's a little bit wrong putting it in my top 5 when I've only just watched it like 2 weeks ago. That's a bit. It just felt a bit wrong to me. But it definitely could have made the top 5. If I was picking the greatest movies, it probably would have. But yeah, it's a great trilogy. I have very few complaints. I thought like I think if I watched it a second time, there would probably be like small plot points I'd hang myself up on, because like once you nerd out about the lore and everything, they might be like, this is like, you might realize that, oh, this is a loose end. They never really explained this. Why is this scene in the book? Because like that's what my friends would say, especially with the extended cut. It's like they put this in for no reason. Like like this.
Yeah, that's the problem with the extended cut. Is like they do add stuff in that's essentially like you would understand if you're a big nerd. And also, it doesn't need to be. That's why I'm saying the original cut of the movie is technically more sound in in that sense. But
I think if I watched the second time, I would notice that and maybe be slightly annoyed by that. But like watching it the first time, it's like kind of blew past me. Like I
yeah. Do you remember the opening of the first movie, the concerning hobbits section?
Yeah.
So after the original intro with the lady voice, and then they explain hobbits. That's not in the original cut. Like that's the sort of like super cool nerd thing. So that's the first chapter of Fellowship of the Ring, is concerning hobbits, and he's essentially just retold that in a slightly more condensed way, and it's really cool. And like the music by itself makes this movie like in contention for greatest, let alone favorite. Like in my eyes, just the soundtrack alone, never been touched, unbeaten.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gustav Holst, for giving everyone their ideas on how to write music, because oh my god, did they do a great job on this one. But yeah, that's my movies. That's your movies. Should we talk about some Counter-Strike now? It's been...
Where are we at time-wise?
36 minutes just for this segment. We're almost an hour in. So let's talk about ESL Challenger Katowice, shall we?
Oh yeah.
Shall we talk about ESL Challenger Katowice? Yeah. There's things happening in the Counter-Strike world. Now that we've finished indulging ourselves talking about movies, because the original Q&A lasts 14 minutes and then there's just over half an hour about one question. But that's how it is sometimes. So Kato has been going on. It's still ongoing. Unlike the other tournament that's been going on this week, that was just basically a play-in. We'll get into that eventually. But for now, let's talk about these groups quickly, because the teams I thought were going to go through were a bit different. For example, just Group A, I didn't think Falcons would go through, but I thought Eternal Fire would be joining Saw in the playoffs. Even though Saw have lost a player, I've been a bit down on Bait in terms of LAN play. I want them to be better. I want them to make a really impressive run at the major. But I was a bit down on them. I wasn't expecting this. And then the other group, Pain going through is fine. I thought MIBR would be able to outduel Monty, though. But MIBR were massively disappointing. So who was your big shock of this event? Which one of these teams did you see, well, honestly, just making it out? Not necessarily making it deep, but making the playoffs at least.
I probably wouldn't have put Bait through just because I thought Falcons and Eternal Fire would show up in a bigger way. But Falcons really do seem to stumble since having added s1mple. Because remember that they came second in Jönköping, which was just a few months ago.
Yep.
With the same team, it's just they had Sunpias instead of s1mple. And they came second at that. So I probably would have put Bait third just because I thought they would lose against Falcons in what would have been a decider game. And then of course I would have put Eternal Fire through. They're definitely the big favorites, but yeah, Bait bested them on 3 maps. So
yeah, they did. It was epic, honestly. The Bait was 2 maps. It was just an overtime on the second map.
Yeah, but they played them in the opener as well, which was the best of one.
I guess, yeah. The opening BO1 loss, I don't doesn't bother me. It's the fact that they then in the rematch are able to beat them. That's the big
Yeah, I
deal.
mean,
Like,
I just mean it's conclusive. They played 3 maps and they won all 3 of them.
sure,
Like they were definitely better than Eternal Fire in this event.
sure.
So yeah, let's all go through. It's 2 BO1s. I don't they run these events with what they call like, oh, it's the only event which runs the vintage DreamHack style where like we play group stage games and all of
Yeah, but
them
it's a
are.
shit style. Stop using it.
It is a little bit like the only thing I change is like make the qualifying games best of threes because you qualify with 2 best of 1 wins. Like that's it. Um, so
Yeah. Just make it.
I'm not.
Honestly, just make it
Yeah,
BO3 start to finish. It's MR12, bud. Like, just put more
yeah,
behind closed doors. You know you're gonna do these like super long
yeah.
formats. Just
Even
start
if you
behind
do,
closed doors.
even if you do put it in front of a stage, I think you definitely could squeeze the games in. Like I don't think it's a problem. But yeah, anyway. Um, anyway, and the other group, I honestly MIBR is obviously a big upset. Them going out last. Monty, lowest ranked team going in, probably should have come third. Behind Pain and MIBR. Legacy, I think have done a very good job for the team they are. I suppose like they are in a particularly good team. I think, but they managed to make it here. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, they did beat Wildcard to make it here, so that's actually a decent win in the qualifier. Um, but yeah, it's yeah. Uh, well done, I suppose, to those teams. As for the play, I honestly thought Saw also might have come last, just because I didn't think they would be this good without Arazoche. But yeah,
Well, this good. 13-11 against Falcons, 13-10 against Bait. They haven't been convincing yet. Let's put it that way. I just think they had a good draw. They won the close games. Good for them. Like,
yeah,
it's not really like they won in their typical style. Like Story, U-Jerks didn't play particularly well. You know, the two
yeah,
stars
no,
they have remaining, the new guy Agil played all right. I just think no, they got the right results in the BO1s, close games. This is why we need BO3s, because this team probably doesn't make it through if multiple BO3s. But I think it's reasonable to see them go through after 2 BO1s. It's just a case of Eternal Fire not showing up. And just to touch on Falcons, I think it has to be done. It has to be done. s1mple, since joining this team, has put up good fragging numbers. Now, I've watched his POV. I've also got that POV on the channel for members. A lot of his kills are empty calories. Especially in the first couple games he played, because he's just being left 1v5, 1v4 a lot, whilst everything else Falcons tries collapses. Like, I'm talking every piece of map control, challenging certain areas, just even holding on to certain parts of the map that are gifted to you as a T side or as a CT side. They're just unable to do so. But then s1mple, left with a bunch to do, is usually good for at least one in a 1v5. And typically, in a lot of these scenarios, he's actually getting like 3 or 4. And you're like, holy crap. He shouldn't be doing this. So when he can finally get activated mid-round is when they actually win the round. When their opening idea for him is pulled off with some amount of polish, and he's able to get the opening frag, rounds seem to go their way. And there's a lot of rounds that they win off the back of him, like getting a double kill, you know, with the orb rotating into a space on the CT side. And you just wish that rounds didn't feel so over by the time he gets into them. I think they'd be a lot stronger as a team. But if you look at their ratings since he's arrived, not a single player above a 0.84 outside of s1mple. And that's Madden.
yeah,
Like, it's abysmal. And it's... They're screaming for help, honestly, as a roster. They need a rifler. You watch them play... What was it, the game I'm thinking of? Yes, the Eternal Fire series. s1mple on Dust 2. 26 and 21. Does everything he can, gets them to overtime. Makes it a game. But there's just no star power to help him on the rifles. And Zentares can just walk into duel after duel, and he just knows he's going to win, because who the hell's going to beat him? If it's not s1mple on the AWP, everyone else on a rifle is just going to miss. So they got outclassed massively in terms of the firepower by Eternal Fire. They need Nico. This team needs Nico. Please, Nico, come save the Falcons. They're so bad. It's kind of horrible. I know some people are going to be like, yay, Falcons are losing because of the implication of who Falcons are. But at the same time, this is s1mple playing some of his best Counter-Strike in a while that we've been able to watch. I want it to succeed. I want it to work. Please come save this roster.
Now I'm gonna ask you now. We have Saw and Monty playing a semifinal. They just started. We have Pain and Bait coming in the other semifinal.
Yeah.
which I think is honestly, I think we said this for the last one, for the Atlanta one as well, and I think I said that one of the semifinals was effectively the final because that was going to be the winner, and then I was wrong. FlyQuest won.
Yeah.
But I think Pain versus Bait is definitely the stronger semifinal, and I would probably pick the winner out of that game.
Ooh.
Because I just don't think Saw, like, they won't be as convincing. I think there's a chance they lose to Monty, and I think Monty, they could show up. They have good players, but it just hasn't really clicked. So it would be a great time for it to click, to like start clicking.
In terms of the quality of Counter-Strike played,
Home
both
crowd.
at this event and for the last like sort of 4 months, 3 months, I guess, since this Polish version of the roster, the officially Polish version of Monty's come together, they've played the best Counter-Strike of the teams not called Pain in this playoff. Like,
Yeah.
they've been actually very good. So I currently have my final in my head is Pain Monty, and I think that's a 3-mapper that I can't really decide right now. I don't have the full scout report on their map pools and how things match up, which is always important when talking BO3s. But no, I think Pain and Bait, I wish Bait were currently poised to be like, guaranteed winner if they win this semi. I don't think they're quite there. We've seen like really good performances out of Captain Kirka in the group stage to even get them this far. Headtrick and NPL both playing somewhat starringly, but not smashing everyone. So that's kind of the difference. They've not quite looked as dominant as they have during their best stretches online, and so I think they're good. They're definitely, and thinking the RMR, I'm very excited to watch them. I'm just a bit worried about their level currently on LAN because it seems they take a dip and they all of a sudden have to start. It's no longer Alex666 helping out. It's no longer MBL dominating. It's no longer Headtrick looking like a star Rauper. It's good performances, but we need a Captain Kirka to come in. We need the other side of the teams, the other players in the team, Essential as well, to start fragging out a lot more for us to have a chance. And I think that's slightly concerning if that's going to be their win condition on LAN. So I'm hoping if they do beat Pain today, it's an NPL Headtrick classic, sort of match where they just go out there, NPL wins 2 openings, before he takes a death sort of thing every round, and Headtrick can mop them up. Like, that's what you have to look for if you want to be a Bait believer.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. I think I do think Saw are leading at the moment, and I think Saw could definitely win that. It really depends on how well they've gelled with this Agil guy, or Ahil, I suppose, because his last name is Hill. I assume that's where he gets his name from. Monty also have like a home crowd advantage. I think that could help them out, to be honest, especially here, where I think like it's a small crowd, but it's also quite an intimate crowd. Like you have your clique of like home. I think every team here has at least a small clique of home fans, or like fans who are cheering for them, and like it's
But the
like
Polish
intimate
one's
enough
going to
where
be the biggest, surely.
yeah. But like for every team, I think like you have like a couple of guys over there. You can see them, like you can see their faces, like they're sitting like 4 meters away from you. Like it's still a setup where I think that could also add some pressure, even if it isn't the biggest crowd and it's not like daunting. It might be like a different kind of pressure because it's a bit more personal, and like especially for Monty, like they might have family here, they might have like people who showed up. I think for them that just fuels them more than detracts from them. But yeah,
You'd hope so. You'd hope so, right?
yeah,
Like, and I think for
yeah,
like a young team like Bait, it might be a problem because they are quite young still, despite some of their near veteran like sort of histories on HLTV. They are quite young, so no, I
yeah,
think Monty should be the favorite pick. I think they also do have, I think, from my estimation, probably the best rifler at the event in Demka. I do think he's tier 1 caliber, just straight up, and should be playing at a higher level than this. The fact that he seems resigned to playing in this Polish roster on Monty is a bit of an issue. Like, I'm not sure if it's like a behind the scenes rep he's got, or he's just locked into some sort of hellish contract and they refuse to ever consider letting him go. I don't know what's happening, but that's what it is. And I do hope they can win this. I think that'll be cool for them. But otherwise, yeah, rooting for Bait. I think that pretty much wraps up the event. It's not that big of an event. There's not too much to discuss. We're going to quickly jump onto our small site retakes, I think. You've got an interesting little topic to lead us off on. I mean, mine's a bit whatever-y, a bit flu. I don't know how else to call it. So yes, Quacke, small site, retake it.
national team play still has a long way to go in Counter-Strike. I think in like traditional sports, all of us like national team play. Like we like watching, for you would be the France playing the World Cup, like in football. Every like it's we've talked about this before at length, but yeah, we simply put, we don't have a lot of that in Counter Strike. We have some. It's very much underdeveloped, and while I think you can have a lot of differing opinions about how much you need that for a sport to how much a sport will benefit from that. I still think it should be doing a lot better than it is. Because this week or this weekend we have had the Nordic Championship in Sweden, where all of the 5 Nordic national federations make like they show up and play this event. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. They show up and they play a cup to settle who is the best out of the Nordic. So Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Iceland. It's the women's Nordic Championship. I don't think there is a men's one, but I think they do this as like a promo for what is effectively like Sweden have always been very good on the women's side. We have always had arguably probably the two goats even to this day in women's CS are Zaz and Juliano. And we have competent players elsewhere as well. So yeah, it's anyway. Point being, a lot of things have gone wrong with this event. First of all, as always, as with last year, not a lot of marketing has happened. This is organized by the Swedish Federation itself. It is a LAN event in Jönköping where anybody can go. It's basically hosted at like the cinema there. So like you buy your
Okay.
tickets through the cinema website. It's like buying movie tickets. I was considering going because it's like it could be cool to pop in for like the final day, but yeah. Chat to the players. But I didn't because Jönköping is 4 hours away, and lucky that because I'm sick. But basically, a lot of things sort of went wrong. Because Sweden are also playing in the World Championship, and both Juliano and Zaz have qualified for the Impact Finals, which are in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so they already have a much more important quote unquote international break. And they already have like a very important club event which they're gearing up for in the next couple of weeks. Last minute, the organizations basically decided, sorry, we cannot send you to this. You need to be like, I assume they have like practice times, like they have a very strict practice regimen. They might even be like a boot camp with both Imperial and Big Equipa. Especially Big, I think they were on boot camp when they finished their Impact League. So yeah, like in Berlin. So, but yeah. So last minute they pulled out. Instead of picking the 2 players who were chosen for the 2024 CS2 squad, which is Sevenlicious and Lina, they went with Mills, who has played with the Swedish national team like 2 years ago, but has never been particularly notable, and somebody who has never, like very much, never done anything proper, like any, like they've never played competitive CS on this level, and like I apologize greatly because I can't remember their name. This is not their fault. Like they are very much good players, I believe. Like for their level, they just aren't really notable to the same degree that Zaz and Giuliani obviously are. But yeah, so that was sort of the first hiccup, or the second rather, next to the complete lack of promotion. Next up, Norway. You didn't want to show up. They didn't come. Like for the Nordic Championship, which has been planned for months, the Norwegian Federation decided, sorry, we can't come. But is it fine if we play from home instead? And then to which the organizations obviously said, no, this is a LAN event, and to preserve competitive integrity, you have to be at the LAN event. So they just didn't participate. Very, very quietly, it has just been a 4-team national team championship in the Nordics. And honestly, it's a 3-team championship because can you imagine what the Icelandic women's national team looks like?
I can. The Icelandics look a certain way.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
On the server, though, I imagine it's not a particularly impressive showing. No.
I've had a very hard time tracking down these players because they have, as far as I can tell, like it's very hard to find them based off of the nicknames that get listed on Wikipedia. Like last year they showed up with a player who I think like her name was the Coffee girl or something like that. Yeah, the Coffee Queen. That was her nickname. Like, how the fuck do you Google that? Like, how do you Google that nickname? But yeah, they have like one player who I think is like face at level 10, probably the best in Iceland. Then they have one who's level 3 and one who is level 4. And one of
Oh.
those was also in last year's team and was then chosen for this year's selection as well. They thought it went well enough.
They must have
Um,
about 5 players to pick from, I'm going to be honest, if that's the
they
case.
probably do. They probably do. So, like, I have to say, why are they here? Like, why? Why do they decide we're gonna like it's? Why did they decide we're gonna effectively like make a joke out of our own women's national team by sending them to Sweden? I suppose it's very fun for them. Like, but it's a little bit like we could just like we could have made this a European championship. We could have had a qualifier. Like, we could have had a qualifier to like, you know, like bring it down a bit. Maybe put in 8 teams and then we end up with 6 teams or 4 teams at the end. And like,
Right.
you know, it is a bit underwhelming. So like nobody cares about this event except for me, which is very unfortunate because it's honestly very exciting. Like, Finland have a very strong squad. They have 5 very competent players. They have Milo Waldi, and then they have Amy B, who was recently of Permitta and has been with the national team for a while. Then they have Silja and Piku, who are with EK Violet and are very, very, very good. So like, they're gonna sweep this. They won last year and they're gonna sweep this year again. But like,
Hmm.
it's relatively exciting. It's a relatively fun event. It's just they do it so badly. Like, it's sort of like what ESL are doing to the Impact League, except scaled up to 10. And this is a criticism of like the federation because they could have handled this a bit better. It's also a criticism of fucking Norway. Like, why don't you show up? Like, it's not difficult.
It's a criticism of Norway.
All of Norway, you guys
Get over your
fucking suck.
fjords.
Just fucking get here. Like, just go here. You can take a train to Jönköping. It's not far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
So to
it's
touch
that.
on, yeah, like
Yeah,
national team play is, I think, quite rightly maligned in the Counter-Strike or even most of the time esports world. Because I'm going to be honest, we don't need, as an ecosystem, we don't need national teams. Now, federations that help regulate teams and the contracts, these sorts of things, would of course be greatly appreciated and I'm sure helpful in all nations. Like, to have some sort of governing body that makes sure players aren't in contract hell, like there's no just gulag type contract, like you're stuck with us for 3 years, despite us not wanting to play with you. Like, you know what I mean? These sorts
yeah.
of ugly messes and silly buyouts. But as far as national teams, nationalism we don't need. Like, if a team is 5 guys from the same country and it works perfectly, that's fine. We don't need to put the Swedish flag above them and pretend that like this is the pride of Sweden, like type stuff, because we're just past it. Like, we're supposed to be like an online community that generally just is about the game. And so I get obviously why people play in national teams, as in like a roster will be from the same country to speak their first language. That's cool. I just don't see like national team play as a thing that we necessarily need. And we've built the esports this far pretty much without it. Like, event after event after event has tried to emulate big World Cups and things like that and shoehorned like try those narratives in as best they can. But you know, the US biggest sport doesn't have national teams. Like, they're trying to bring it into the next Olympics, but they've been fine for the last 100 years playing American football without really any nations involved. Like, even as players have become more international, no one's really bothered about, oh, could we get a Team UK versus Team USA? Who gives a fuck? Like, just this, the game is what people are here for. And I think as long as Counter-Strike is the best shooter, which it is, there's no comparison, no question. Valorant fans cry, Rainbow Six fans cry harder. No one plays your game. It is the best shooter. And as long as we have that and we have the personality that our game has, we don't need help growing. As long as we're the only people holding up smashed desks, you know, casters cursing left, right, and center, we're still the only adult video game, really, like, on the scene. And that's cool. That's fine. I don't need to have a World Cup where ZywOo's forced to play with Joko. I don't need it. I don't need it. Like, let him play with Mezzy and let him play with Spinks and just keep that bullshit for the people who want to care about that bullshit. We're here for the game. Let's play some Counter-Strike. Like, that's what I think matters.
Yeah, we don't need it. I don't think we need it. I think it could have been a fun thing. It's something that I think I said before on a previous take of this, which I don't feel as strongly about anymore, but it's like something that the general person could rally behind. Like anybody could put on Counter-Strike on the telly if it's Sweden playing, and they could get behind that more so than if it's NIP playing and they have no idea who they are. But yeah, we don't need it. Like esports will function without it. I just think it's fun, and I think it could be really fun. Um, and like if we could have proper, if we could have like the Swedish federation is doing a lot in Sweden. Our esports are very much shifting towards a more traditional model of like you have not per se non-profit, but you have more like organizations not necessarily in it for the profit incentive. They are in there for like a community incentive.
Yeah.
And the federation is very much involved in that. And the federation, like putting together a national team, it, like as things move more towards the traditional sports model, I think that's sort of what's going to happen. Like ice hockey and football is very much in that sphere already. It would just be pretty fun, I think. And if we could have a proper like let's say a 3 week, just here we go. Here's an international break. This is where we play the World Cup, and like 3 weeks you get to go boot camp with these other guys and girls who are in the national team. That could be pretty fun because you could see like you get to answer a lot of questions. Like we always have all of like people always have all of these questions. Like what if you took let's see, Zaiwu isn't exactly the answer, but we have spoken before. Could you make a full 5 Ukrainian roster which could win a major right now? And the answer is probably yes. And the Ukrainian
Yeah.
Federation could probably test that theory by putting that together. But a lot of the time, it's the clubs getting in the way. Like because we don't need it, it's difficult to make like an event which is notable enough for them to go away from their club commitments. Um, and I think in a potential future where esports has grown enough, where like a need for structuring and better planning and so to speak, more unionization, perhaps, like of the esports, where like there are more organizations who are looking out for the well-being of the teams and the players and the tournament organizers and everything to make sure this ecosystem is a bit more stable. In a potential future, that might be something we have, where we have like a small international break for 3 or 4 weeks. Ukraine gets to put together the absolute best team they could. If nothing else, just to answer the question, what would be the best possible national team right now? Who are
Yeah.
the best nation in Counter Strike? I think that that's an interesting narrative, and people are interested in that narrative. Like what would be the best Danish team you could put together right now? Yeah, there's one way to test it. You put it together, and
Mm.
that would be interesting. It's not something we need. It is literally in esports. I don't know how much we need it in football either, to be honest. But like if
Oh, in
it
football,
is,
national federations are the history of the game. Like the
yes,
game that has to be played in person and that developed over 100 years ago on the continent of Europe required
yeah,
some amount of national teams to
yeah,
make international play worth it. But the idea that's interesting to me is essentially if you want to make a World Cup, I think it has to be Valve sanctioned. It has to be
yeah,
essentially the Valve Esports Commission is my solution to everything. If you want to make something awesome and fun, the Valve Esports Commission has to happen. They have to control the calendar, and it has to be, through integrity and through integrity commissions and through like player unions and things like that. There has to be some kind of balance struck where you can do everything that's super cool and also keep this fucking sane, because one of the problems we're having in football right now is that everyone keeps going, oh, and this would be cool, and this, and this, and this, and the players are just like, yo, what the fuck? I'm
yeah,
basically playing 11 and a half months out of the year. Now, Counter-Strike, sure, isn't as physically intensive, but there's a reason most players play like, 50 maps a week just between practice and officials. Like, they
yeah.
play so much. To then add an extra burden of then, oh, I need to, on top of that, boot camp with a whole new team. Bloody hell. Like,
Into into
it's a
in
lot of
today's
work.
in today's ecosystem, it would have to be the Valve Esports Commission. I think
Yeah.
in a future, it wouldn't necessarily need to be Valve. I think this is something that could have been. It could have been the CSPPA in a another universe.
In a
But
world where they had any authority, sure, but that's the
exactly,
reason.
yeah.
That's the reason it
In
always comes
in a
back to
in a
Valve,
world
right?
where
Like the authority
in
is
a
theirs.
yeah in a world where most people agreed that we care about the CSPPA, which doesn't happen, then that
Yeah,
would have applied. But yeah. Anyway, regardless of what happens, it doesn't really matter because if we do it right now, it is just gonna fail because pretty much every single national team just kind of underperform, not on a competitive level, but on an organizational level. Um, right now, like it is definitely it's a mess. It's been a complete mess, and I'm kind of looking forward to the World Cup. I think that could be fun. Just
Yeah,
for
we'll
shenanigans'
see.
sake. Just for shenanigans' sake.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Right, sure. Shall I take my small site away?
Go ahead. I think mine
So
was more of a
it's
medium site, to be honest.
yours was a pretty medium site, but mine's very
Yeah.
small, and it's more of a topic I want to bring up. I want to just compare contrast some teams, just the way they're building up to this RMR, and kind of some of the concerns I have for some of them. So obviously I have teams that I'm obviously a big fan of that I want to see succeed. Teams like, let's for example pluck one of these out, TSM. TSM are a team I'm heavily invested in seeing succeed. The problem is that coming into this event, they have lost 5 straight BO3s online. Sure, online play, whatever. But it essentially means that the end of their prep that they want to do in terms of officials, not there. It's just not there. They wanted to play those officials through, I think, like the Winline Insight Season 6. They weren't planning to lose BO3s to Space and Hotu. That just wasn't a part of the plan. They wanted to play the full Swiss system out, probably make playoffs, and then see what they're at. Instead, they go home pretty early, pretty disappointingly. And for players like Syra, especially, I think, had a terrible time of it. Yeah, their new addition, Syra, everyone but Xiphon sub 1.0 and Xiphon a 1.04, considering how he's been performing previously, is underwhelming. But they're like one extreme, and on the other extreme, you have a team like Aurora, who aren't playing like well either, but they're playing a bunch of extra events. They were at Thunderpick World Championship, losing to the big teams that they probably, some of them they might have to face like in the actual RMR itself. So I'm just worried about a lot of these teams' prep, how it's going, what they're looking like going in. Yeah, and just on a positive note, like I guess Gamer Legion had their best run. They won the CCT Season 13, CCT Europe Season 13, with wins over Drillers, Bait, Nine Pandas, and Passion UA in the playoffs. And that's cool. But then, you know, they immediately basically they lost their first playoff game of the next season and haven't played since the 11th of October, an official. So it's pure, like for a month straight, boot camp type prep. So I think there's a lot of mystery going into the RMR. There's a lot of danger, I think, for the top teams in terms of some of these rosters. You don't have any tape recently. Like, play a month of prep. I can design a whole new fucking strat book almost in a month. Like, it's short. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm saying that's a lot of time of just straight practice to work some things in. So I think we're looking at a very tough to predict pair of RMRs. And especially with some of the top teams resurging, falling off, I think there's a lot of upsets ready to happen, and the seeding that's been locked in maybe won't be too accurate in terms of how the teams actually play when we next see them.
This is a decent segue into our next topic, but like
it is, yes.
There are some teams who probably prepped for the RMR by playing the online Thunderpick World Championship thing, which is just wrapped up this week. And a lot of these top teams have also flopped. I think NIP being a flop isn't necessarily a big flop.
Not a surprise.
I think Imperial were favorites in both of those games. But Virtus Pro losing twice to OG, who were playing with a stand-in, who I believe they're not actually practicing with. Like, they are practicing with Spook. Draken confirmed this just this week.
Okay.
But they played with Mikey, and if I didn't know better, I would think the reason was because Spook couldn't play because he was playing the qualifier with Johnny Speeds or something like that. Like, I don't know. Whatever the reason is. Anyway, that's a big loss for Virtus Pro. Then you have M80 losing to Bestia twice. That's huge for the American RMR. Like, Bestia being a very much outside candidate for getting anywhere close to near to the major, and like M80 should be in the major. So that's pretty big for the RMR. But yeah, it is interesting how different teams have sort of prepped.
Yeah, and performed as well. Like, God.
Yeah. But maybe to segue into that Thunderpick World Championship.
Yeah, that's essentially the idea. I'm just going to mention this topic offhand, but realistically, the Thunderpick LAN finals are now settled. That's the idea of the next topic, because yeah, we had that online event to qualify people.
Yep.
And that was all to qualify for the LAN finals.
I am astonished for an event which will deliver like a shit ton of money to anybody who makes it into the grand final. 150,000 to the loser in the final, $500,000 to the winner. I am astonished that Virtus.pro were the only top 10 team who accepted this invite, because I presume everybody was invited. Like, no other top team showed up. It's Heroic who were 11th, and then Mongols who were 13th, and then it is basically, top 20 and below. Like, it's I was kind of astonished at that. I think maybe, some teams probably should have made it through the qualifier. I mean, NIP lost in the qualifier and then still got an invite.
Because they
Sorry.
are the kings of the fraudulent invite, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, Young Ninjas played the qualifier and they got extremely far. But yeah.
No,
Anyway.
so yeah, the event itself in terms of the qualifier for the LAN, I didn't realize this. I just saw the 4 groups and I thought, oh, okay, it's a 4-group event. I thought this would be just a normal championship type event, but instead it's the top 2 of each group go into a play-in sort of BO3. First places get to play second places, and winner goes through to the Thunderpick World Championship.
Yeah.
Which is a 4-team LAN, which seems silly by itself, but it's that's how the
Studio LAN in Berlin.
Yeah, Studio LAN in Berlin. What an idea! But at least 5th to 8th of the World Championship, as it were, the play-in section, made 20k. So that's good for a team like Bestia, I guess. Well, it'd be better for a smaller org as well, but any org. But no, if we look at the teams who make it through, it's 3D Max, Mongols, Heroic, and OG. And quite importantly, so the teams that miss out, like Cloud9, just talking about them about to go into the RMR, them needing kyousuke, losses to Mongols and Fnatic, only beating 9Z and looking just short on firepower in the games they lose. And in the game they win, it's Heavy God, and then it's everyone else. Like, Heavy God did a lot of heavy lifting, as he has done for his entire tenure on this roster. He's been ridiculously impactful. We knew he'd be good, but we didn't think he'd be the solo carry. A lot of people had belief in Icy, a lot of people had belief in Axile coming back, and he looked initially pretty good, but yeah, that's been disappointing. Just a touch, sorry, I had to bring this up. The groups are so poorly balanced. Like, they're so poorly balanced. Look at Group A, then look at Group D. Like, you're telling me these two, they're not the same. They're not the same. 3D Max OG Virtus.pro Falcons. The other side of it, Big Bestia M80 Aurora. Like, these two things are not anything alike. So, yeah, a bit of a weird one there. And obviously 2 of the Group A teams actually end up making the LAN finals. So, just a weird event, weird format, a strange way to distribute basically $1 million or $850,000 worth of money, in my eyes. Not how I'd have done it. But here we go. 4 teams qualify. Heroic should win it. I can't wait to see 3D Max lift the title.
It is interesting that I think OG making it through is extremely interesting, because they have those 2 wins against Virtus.pro, yeah. But then they also beat Big, which is cool. They're still playing with Modo, who I think a lot of people wrote off in the past half year or so.
Yep.
They do still have Mikey, who didn't go particularly huge, and Fiku is kind of one of the guys who have really showed up, which is cool. Like, I don't know if it's him finally delivering on his promise, but like, he's that's cool. So they're going into this big LAN event. Honestly, yeah, like, as much as Heroic should win, there's a 3rd place decider as well, which does matter a bit. OG should come last. I could see them beating 3D Max, of course. Like, I don't think 3D Max are particularly strong. It's very much day form for them, I think. Mongols, as much as they are very competent, I think they can also be mortal. Like, they can definitely have a big bomb out game. And like, Heroic, fuck. It wasn't long ago that we talked about Heroic as being a team like in free fall. It wasn't at all a long time ago that we thought they had huge problems. And then they had, strong Espu, strong IEM Rio, things. Gotta turn around. Sorry, I'm allergic to Heroic. No, I think it could go either way. It would be huge for the Mongols to take a $500,000 payout. That would be amazing. It would be pretty huge for 3D Max to take a $500,000 payout, considering they are like in negotiations with their organization. They might part ways with 3D Max and find a new org, or find no org. They might play the RMR orgless. Like, that would be big. So yeah, even just making the final is big for like the lower 3 teams of this. So yeah, that's going to be exciting just because of how much money there is. And that's why I think it's so weird, because we always talk about the significance of like prize money in the Valve ranking, and still like fucking nobody showed up for the Thunderpick World Championship.
No,
Like,
it's strange, isn't it? It's really
yeah,
strange.
OG as well, coming in as a replacement invite. I don't know if they even played the qualifier. They might have done and lost. Yeah, they did. They lost in the quarterfinal. They went sorry, round of 16. They lost to Alternate Attacks, who are
Who
now
notice didn't get an invite.
who have also now suspended their CS:GO division, or
Yeah.
the Counter-Strike division. Um, I don't actually know why OG got the replacement invite. Like, there are very competent teams, even in the same elimination round, like Bait, Sinners. Like Bait, I guess we're in Katowice, but like Sinners, Game Legion, Amkel, like I would have accepted those. Even
Yep.
higher up as well, you have like TSM, Gaming Gladiators, Betboom, like Zero Tenacity even. These are valid invites for the Thunderpick World Championship. But yeah, OG came in as a replacement invite, and now they are literally in the LAN finals. So,
Yep.
yep. Let's see what happens. I think this is actually going to be exciting. As much as a studio event is a bit, Snorefest,
Yeah.
I do think it could be really interesting. Just because of the money on the line, it's like a lot of tension building on games that we pretty much never see. Like, when else are you potentially going to see a grand final between like Heroic and 3D Max? Like, when else are you going to see that? When that final has $650,000 on the line, that's
I mean,
huge. I think.
that used to be an online cup classic, I'm sure, but
Yeah. Okay.
way
But yeah.
back in the day.
Yeah.
But no, for now, yeah, it's going to be an interesting event. I still have
Yeah.
problems with this format. Like, why are we doing this weird 4-team studio LAN for this much money?
Yeah. It's
But
weird.
that's whatever. Like, yeah, that's their
It
budget, I
it's
guess.
half a grand slam. Like, for
Yeah,
the
half a Grand Slam to beat Mongols.
to beat Mongols at best. Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the alarming thing. But I just wanted to highlight one thing before we moved on.
Hmm.
Imperial, despite not going through, did have one player play quite well. A player I've got a vested interest in, and who I believe actually is far better than his team ever suggests. And a lot of his matches kind of go unnoticed. And that's Try. Now, Try he still plays the same way he did when I made prospects on him. Pretty much the same. Like, he's a really like smart, positional, pre-aim focused AWPer who has secretly like elastic wrists. Like, he doesn't show off his flicks too much because he's usually just aiming in the right place. But who's also ridiculously fond of using his pistol. Like, you'll see him switch to a pistol way quicker than any other AWPer. Most AWPers haven't thought about their pistol yet. They're still scoping in for another shot when Try has his out. Like, he just loves using it. Very good with pistols though, so it's fair enough.
Yeah.
Pistol round rating aside at this event, he's actually a good pistol player. It's just a small sample size. But he, had a great event in terms of his performances. I still think he could be a piece on a bigger team than Imperial, or on Imperial when they do eventually become a bigger team. Once they start making the right moves, or this roster somehow magically clicks. So they're going to be another team to watch out for at the RMR. And he's a player who I'm still very fond of.
Yeah, I think they have made the right moves. I think this is a decent team. I think a lot of people forget that Imperial is no longer the retirement home for Fallen and Fur and those guys. Like, they have No Way and Decency are like good up and coming players, I think. And then you have Try as the opera, and you have Vinny, who is still a pretty competent player, I think, for his roles. And then you have Phelps, who like used to be the big guy pretty much, and has had a very strange career.
Yeah, he's had a strange career, and on this team has been recently lackluster. Like, the last sort of 3 months, 6
Yeah.
months, even going back to an event I saw. We saw them out a while ago. He's like the guy you're like, oh, if he gets it right, they're a very challenging team to play against because he's very aggressive, very explosive.
Yeah.
But he just hasn't been successful in his attempts. So I think there's still a move or two away.
Yeah, maybe.
But no, just wanted to highlight them before we move on to
Yeah.
the return. It's been a while since I've done a set of these between us being away and then having so much to talk about the last episode. It's the King's Tears. Sound the royal trumpets. I have sent you my tiers for your examination so that when I'm done presenting them, you are free to criticize anything you want. Gone with a bit of a strange theme for the tiers. I said this before the show went off. I was like, I can't really explain them all. I'll try my best to like create a a picture that makes sense in your minds. But let's get on to the King's tiers. Now, the lowest tier. These teams are running out of time. They haven't shown me a lot so far. They need to do it rather fast in terms of especially like contention at Blast World Finals to win them. This is what the idea of this one is. It's for the Blast World Finals. Who's, I think, likely to win? And these teams, some of them aren't even attending. Just for context, extend Blast World Finals all to the Major. Just to the Major 2, because this is all going on in the future. These teams are just running out of time. To make me love them, they're just running out of time. Now, these next teams are kind of in a nightmare sort of middle ground. Some of them are happy to be here because they're finally out of a slump. They're finally carrying some weight forward. Some of them are on the way down. They're meeting each other here. That's kind of a theme you'll see in a couple of these tiers, where these teams are kind of, feels like they're at a crossing point with each other. And that's kind of not where they want to be. Some of them it is, some of them it isn't. So these are my teams who are kind of in that nightmare 4th tier. Some, like Virtus Pro, are about to fall off. They're about to go down and out. Furia felt like they were until they had that magical Rio playoff run that was completely fake and only powered by kyousuke. But Liquid, I actually think, are shockingly on the way down, but Heroic on the way up for sure. I almost had Heroic the tier above this. That's how much I currently believe in Heroic. So that's just a heads up. Now this tier is the new Magic Wands. These are the guys who have... They're trying to reignite some magic, and one team has done it, I'd say successfully, in terms of making deep runs, and the other one is still trying to figure it out. They haven't got anything coming out of that. They're shaking it, they're saying the magic words, nothing is firing. The wand is broken, the wand isn't functioning, something's wrong. This next team, this is the chasing pack. This group, they're the Earthquake. They're the ones, you see them, and you just like, oh crap. Like, you have to take them seriously. They are going to put some pressure on you in the big games. They're going to be there in the biggest moments on the stages, both at this Blast World Final and probably at the Major as well. You'll have to deal with them twice. These guys, they'll make you the Earthquake. They are a problem. Especially, I think some people would have been surprised to see Spirit here, given their most recent events. But I still have them above FaZe. I still have them in this group, and I still, just because of the individual. You see how I removed that S. Individual. We all know who I'm talking about. And finally, the top tier. This is the Juggernaut. These are the teams that I think in the next 2 events should be favorites to go all the way. These are the guys who are going to win these events. If it's not one of these 2 teams, then you shouldn't have bet on it. Because this is not gambling advice. This is just a preview of where they are right now. But I think these 2 are the favorites to win the next 2 events. Vitality and Na'Vi. Bit weird, I think most people are going to think, to see Vitality up here. But I am a big believer in just the theoretical quality of this squad. And I've made this point for other rosters. I basically projected this return to form for Heroic. Just there is no way they are not at this level. You cannot tell me this group of players is not here. They just are. And they will show it, I think, in the coming events. I'm not saying they're guaranteed to win these 2 events, but I'd be surprised if they didn't win at least one of them. And if they do go win that Major, if they win both in a row, hell, Vitality, that's an awkward conversation for a lot of people to have. So I think they should be up there. Let's see how they play. Please, Epics, don't threaten to murder your team and get them tilting, because I need them to be good. So, Quacke, I don't know if you know the theme of these names. I hope you do, as a music guy.
I do. These are Tyler the Creator's song titles. These are Tyler the Creator's titles. Yeah.
Sorry, just one more note on the theme. Notice how the top isn't "See You Again," because these are not era-defining. These are not things people are going to be talking about 5 years later. Top most listened to still 7 years later. Like, it's still one of the most streamed hip-hop songs after all these years. Neither of these teams, I think, is an era-defining level currently or in the next 2 events. So that's just a tidbit I had to throw in.
Yeah, because we had this conversation in the comments over the last 2 episodes, I think, where we talked about if Na'Vi are starting an era. I wouldn't, even if they start an era in the next, like, even if in a year we consider Na'Vi to have an era with this team, I don't think I would consider the past 3 or 4 months to be part of that era. It would be the build-up. But anyway, I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think I would move Vitality down. I just don't think compared to Navi, who are pretty much ticking every box at the moment. Like all of the players are, fulfilling what they should do to the degree where they can come into as favorites into any event they participate in. Vitality have some variance in the level of their players. I think Spinks is not really where I think he should be. I I think Flamesy is doing a good job, but he's not quite there to the point where they can win games off of him. And I mean, for the next event, they're gonna have Jax, so like I'm
They have
not
Jax in
sure.
space of Mezzy, which is an
An
awkward thing we
upgrade,
didn't. Well, no, just in no fucking universe is that true. But
I get.
a conversation point that me and Yumi and I missed on the double swing that released Friday.
Yeah, they
Full of
announced it a
noise.
long time ago, so I think a lot of people
Exactly.
have forgotten about it
It's like
already.
3 weeks ago. I checked the news page where it happened. I was like, "Oh, that's so
Yeah.
long ago. That's why no one's seen it." But just a note on things like Flame Z.
Hmm.
Where is he? I'm trying to find him on the handy little arena rating graph. He is, yeah, in elimination games. That's what I was looking for. A 1.14 rated player. Like that's pretty much as good as Malbs, close to Nico and JL. Like he's up there as a star rifler in these big, like, win or go home games. It just, the part that fails oftentimes, we always come back to it. It's Spinks, but it's also, we've seen it too many times now to not say it. It pisses off his fans every time we do it. But ZywOo does also have those lackluster big games. I mean, if you look at his rating dip in the eliminations, it's a bit of a problem. It's not as bad as sometimes it sounds like we're making it. Like, yeah, all matches 1.35, elimination 1.28, arena games 1.24. He's still playing at star, borderline superstar level. It's just, yeah, Flamesy does more than enough considering his roles. It's just we have the two big stars not delivering as you'd really want them to. In those key matches, they lose. When they win events, obviously they're just banging heads all day long. But no, that's why I have them up there. I think even given the Jack stand-in, they have a chance of winning the Bloodsport finals. Then afterwards at the major, I have them as low-key, like neck and neck with Na'Vi as actually being favorites to go and win it. Like I kind of think they got that chance.
I'm gonna say that the few criticisms I have of your tiers are actually the names, because I think you've missed an opportunity here. So
Okay, yeah.
Nightmare, they are very much in like trials right now. Some of them are on the way up, but they need to prove themselves. Some of them are on the way down. They need to prove they can still hang. Death Camp, they are in the death camp. They need to
Yeah.
make their way out of the death camp.
You see, I was struggling with this. I need to form a committee. That's what I need to do. I need to have multiple people on this, like on the tiers, to help me name them, especially because I was laboring over this for like an hour. Like I was trying. I was going through his full discography. I was like, I don't know why I decided this would be the theme, but I just did. I think after running out of time, it just worked.
I have a poster of Flower Boy like above my couch. I can send a picture later. For New Magic 1, they're sort of on their own. 911 Mr. Lonely. they are
I
sort
didn't
of
listen. I didn't listen to that album. I have no love for that
that is
album,
Flower
so I
Boy. Yeah,
can't.
they're sort of on their own right now. Sort of on their own. As for Earthquake, you mentioned individual. Who that boy? Because
Yeah,
it's
that's just for Spirit. That's
for
just
no,
for
I
Spirit.
think it applies for all three of these teams because they have Donk, Munacy, and Jimpat. It's like, especially with Nico underperforming in the last event, G2 are very much like it's a bit of the Munacy show once again. And Mouse, I think, yeah, Zershin is up there, but like the big games, it is always Jimpat. It is always Jimpat on a 140, and everybody has nothing else.
I don't think that's quite true. I think that's quite fair, especially given Zershin's play. And then on G2, given Malb's T-side play, he's actually... I'm not just saying he's as good as Munacy in general. On the T side, he's as high rated, if not higher, than everyone on G2 at this point. It's ridiculous how important he is for that team. So, no, I do think the rest of them, there are multiple win cons. The Spirit, it does feel very singular. It is... If it's not Donk, they're struggling to really make it work right now. There's very little else working for them, and it should be better. It should be better. But I don't have the faith I do have in like the Vitality squad. I don't have Zontix up there in my player rankings for myself. I still think Shiro, whilst I do like the way he plays sometimes, he hasn't won the clutches he needs to be classic Shiro from the Gambit team that was able to upset a bunch of people. You know, he's not been as performant in those late rounds where you need him to. So for me, for them, it is just a very one-man show. And it's one hell of a man, still a boy, but one hell of a man to have a one-man show. When does he turn 18? Has he turned 18 yet?
Next year, I think.
He's been 17 all year, it feels like.
I
When's this
think
kid born?
well, he was 16 when the year started, I think.
Was he?
He's born in 2007, he's born, I'm pretty sure.
Donk.
So that would be...
January 25th is his birthday. Yeah, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. He is going to be a boy all year. All right, well.
Yeah. Could be the youngest major champion if he wins. Nice. Well, he will be the youngest major champion.
And MVP if he wins MVP.
And MVP.
There's no way they win it without him being MVP.
Yeah, if they win, it's not going to be Shiro MVP.
But yeah, those are the tiers. Yeah, I understand why Vitality is the biggest point of conflict, but yeah. I just like it. I just like it. I see it coming. You know, it's in the waters.
Yeah.
All right, the Eternal Shuffle. We're on to the classics. Don't worry, people listening in the background. We are soon to be done, and you can eat soon.
This is gonna be like one of the longest episodes, and like it's not because we had a lot to talk about. We did, but like some of them are super long because we have a shit ton of things happen, and it's like almost like tiring to talk about. We've just had a lot of fucking fun in this episode. I think this is.
We spent half an hour talking about movies, dude. That's why we.
Yeah, fuck. Right. I love it. Yeah.
Right, Bleed are now unpaid, and we've got a whole bunch of drama around the Bleed organization, not just in the Counter-Strike division, which is the interesting part, but for me, it basically, the fact that not only are they now competed under unpaid, played fairly well, but also are free to go their own way, and it seems a bunch of them have been signed by different orgs. I'm just curious to see where these guys end up. I think that's the conversation now, like where does Jacob go, especially? Because he's shown so much quality, given his age, how many teams he's played for. He's been around forever, and yet just seems infallible. Like he just doesn't stop fragging. Like when does this guy ever retire, get old, get washed? Like hurry up, bro.
Yeah, all of these players are extremely interesting. I think even Vladen, as much as he has never played on a top team, so to speak, I think he very much flies under the radar as one of the best players in the world in his role right now, just because he has had several of these like temporary stand-in stints on very competent teams where he's done a very, very, very good job. Because we talk about like when he played for ENS, that was very good. Because I can't remember what the event was, but there was a one-off when he played there. He played with Series Nation. I think he did a good job there. It was very short-lived. They shut down shortly after. He played for Bleed, then he didn't play for Bleed, and then now he played for Bleed unpaid when they needed him, and I think he did a good job there as well. Like he's a competent player, and as like a supportive player. And I think that goes for a lot of these teams. Cypher, I think, has shown a level which I wouldn't have expected of him from Bleed. Like across the whole team, I think he has showed a decent level. Like along with all the bullshit, which I wouldn't have pinned him to do before this team happened. Jacob as well, always a candidate for being a very good player. And Nexa, honestly, we talk about this. If Nexa steps into tier 2, into a proper team that he can gel with, he is a valuable player, and he could be a very valuable player. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where all of them end up. Kassad looking for other gigs. He's open to other gigs. So yeah. So some of them are offers. It's not going to be RMR teams, but it's going to be something, and it's going to be interesting to see what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I especially like the idea of as you said, Vladen finding another role, because he is a great role player. That's no doubt about it. Every team he's gone into, I feel like he's played his role to a high level, delivered a fair performance every time. And I feel like he's not just a plug and play guy. Like we've seen here, they've developed and played together for a little bit, and he continued to progress and frag out. So no complaints from my point of view about Vladen's level. Like sure, his average rating is never going to be the most flattering, but he does the hard things and he does them well. So no, Vladen's a very good pick in terms of players of the future. Yeah, you saw it at the Res Champs. Like he ends up with a 1.02 rating. The team does well. He does his job. So curious to see where they end up. Up next, OG have cut Nexius, and plus Spook is expected. But they're currently playing with Mikey in the Thunderpick stuff, but as you've said, leaked by Draken, that Spook is still pracking with them. He's expected to be the replacement. I think that's going to be fantastic, especially if we get the same level out of Buzz and out of Modo that we just did, if you're telling me I can then add Spook to the mix, who's probably one of the better Swedish players and obviously a really impressive tier 2 pro right now, if he comes into that roster and plays the way he's played, honestly, just on Johnny Speeds for the most part, OG are fun again. Maybe they're not insane. Maybe Fiku comes back down to earth and then they're a bit more reasonable in terms of their firepower availability. Just because between him, Modo, like they're not the craziest players, but at least they played well recently. So adding Spook into the mix has me excited. I think that's a fair place to be. Just excited.
Yeah, it is an exciting move. Spook is expected. I was surprised by this, but like Draken just this week said like, yeah, Spook is practicing with OG. It's like an open secret, and I was like, really? Because he played one series and then they played with Mikey. So I just assumed that like Mikey was they had gone away from Spook and they're now practicing with Mikey, but that also doesn't really make sense because Mikey's going to be in the RMR, and OG are not. So it would be a bit of a strange move. But yeah, I think it is going to be Spook. I'm trying to look now who is organizing this event because it is Grid. Are Grid also the ones who produce CCT? I don't know, but I am going to check that right now. I think it might be Grid. Yes, it is Grid. Okay, so that would be why, because they have some very controversial question marks. Basically, the way that it has come forward that tournaments that Grid runs is that they have a service which they contact to check, is this team sus? And then that service, through some magic black box that we don't have no idea what it is, just say yeah, or they say no. And that's why Johnny Speeds don't play CCT. That's why some other teams don't play CCT. There might not be any basis for it. It might just be a hunch. It might just be, oh, their performance follows patterns of match fixing, which could also just be random. Whatever it is, I would honestly assume they played with Mikey instead because Spook wasn't allowed to play Thunderpick. That could be an honest reason, but I don't know. I don't know. It's something that I have literally just thought of, and I am gonna ask someone about later.
Okay. Yeah, fair. Because I've heard about this before. The secret, like, oh, this team is considered, unworthy or like in some way malicious, despite no real evidence. There's no actual match fixing claims put forward by anyone of any substance. It's just some he said she said bullshit. Like it's nonsense. So I don't know. They probably examine some sort of weird betting pattern and assign it to things.
Tiny
Wouldn't be the first
tangent.
time.
Tiny tangent. OG
Go for it.
actually did play a CCT series with Spook the other week. That's the one series he's played with the team. So the funny thing is that I think this is very much random. Like
Oh,
it
okay.
could also just be like I can't go to Berlin for whatever reason. Like he might have had like there might have been a problem with that or something, and then they figured we might as well play with someone else then. But like something funny. This is the funny tangent. Every single current member of Johnny Speeds has like at one point or another in 2024 pretty much played CCT events one way or another, either with Godsent or with whoever else. I think so. It was 2023, at least like in a recent future. They have played CCT events, no problems. Johnny Speeds itself, as an entity, gets flagged for being suspicious when none of the current 5 players do, and that's funny.
It just points to it being a pile of horseshit, to be honest. So
It is just a pile of horseshit.
whatever. All right, one win have added Joe, Cronus, and Ozik to finish up their roster since cutting a bunch of washed mid as fuck people. It's an interesting move in that I think Joe's pretty cool as like a IGL, like to have on a team in the past. He's been like a decent fragger whilst being a caller. But the two other names, Cronus and Ozik, are complete unheard of in my eyes. You told me they were academy players before, but there's not really much to look up on them if you want to go digging, and nothing positive particularly either.
Yeah, no, I have nothing. They've built around Hobbit and Latic, which I think is a good move. Geo coming back, I think that's a good move. I think he is a decent player who can probably bring a lot here, especially as IGL. Otherwise, I think the leadership would have fallen on Hobbit, which I'm not a huge fan of. So yeah.
Yeah, he better be the IGL in my eyes as well.
Yeah, Ozik and Kronos. I think Ozik was like it's the kind of FPL grinders. They've sat very high on the FPL leaderboard. I think he was top 5 just the other week, which is more an indication of skill, to be honest, than anything else. Or at least you have time to play a lot of FPL. No, they're pretty much unknown. But yeah, they were on One Win Academy before, which they never played an HLTV map. They played one HLTV map on the team in the, was it major qualifier? Yeah, they played in the major qualifier. Um, Lost, but yeah, they played one HLTV map on there, so good on
That's
them.
it.
I assume they're skilled Russian teenagers because they are. They're
Given
like
given the number
18
of
and 20.
skilled
Yeah,
Russian teenagers have been pulled out of the scene, like the depths of that scene, I wouldn't be surprised
yeah,
if this is two more. So yeah, that's essentially the moves. Interesting to see where that goes. I'll be following along. But finally, prospects of the week, the final segment of every show. I'm going to lead off with a player I'm so glad to see back on top of things, at least in terms of the tier 2 and tier 3 world. That's Kenszor, another
yep.
Ukrainian. The endless list of talented Ukrainians, but he's definitely one of them. Did a prospects demo for members, and we took a look, and my god, this guy is definitely sharp. I mean, the team overall don't play the greatest brand of Counter Strike. I think it has to be said, but he himself is mechanically very sharp, very precise, and has put up an absolutely bonkers stat line this week. 1.36 rating, great impact, but more importantly, just played really well in the games they've played. I mean, he plays for Kono, they played Copenhagen Wolves and crushed them. Navi Junior and won. That's a really tough scalp to take. For those of you who don't know, Navi Junior, they just beat Drillers here, but in general, they don't lose a lot in Tier 2 play. Yeah, they just won the United 21 League, having beaten Drillers twice to win that. They've beaten Cybershock Gaming Gladiators recently, a bunch of other decent squads from Tier 2 and Tier 3. So that's a tough scalp to take. He was able to do that with them. They finally go down to Aurora Youngblood in the, I believe it was actually the United 21 event, or maybe a different one. Either way, they finally go down in that game. He puts up probably his best series of the week in that game that they lose. So no, Kenszor, definitely want to follow. Just a shame there's not really the team to go with him right now. I think this roster's a bit limited, but he's definitely a player to keep track of.
Yeah, very good pick. Um, a bit of an obvious one at this point. He's a retake the week classic, I think, at this point.
It's only ever been on here once before, and that was like a good couple months ago.
Okay, okay. Yeah, he's a. But we mentioned him and we mentioned his team and like stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
August.
do good. Yeah, it's cool that this is like the remnants of what was EC Kiev for all of my 2020 Counter Strike enjoyers, which spawned out of IKLA. Or sorry, IKLA spawned out of EC Kiev. Um, yeah, it would have been Kiev. Anyway, yeah, he's a good player. Like I can't comment on much more. We've talked about him before, and it's always nice to see when he does well because he's one of those that I think could. Like Kono aren't quite that team just yet, but it's
Hmm.
one of those. He's one of those players that I think could stand up to, like a Jambo or a Jacasmo or a NPL or a Bait
Mm-hmm.
player. Or a Jackie or a Smash who are doing well on Favbet at the moment, or like those kind of players. He's one of those players who I think could stand up to them, but like the team isn't really with him right now. It's been very much up and like weird for them. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, if he can hit the stride and like have a good finish to the year, that's gonna be really cool for him. Especially as like I don't know how like they decide to run with it, but like let's say Bait and or Passion UA miss out on the major, or like they consider a challenger stage exit out of the major to be a failure. Um, do they make roster changes? Kenszor is a prime candidate for pretty much any spot on those teams, I think.
it
So
would
yeah,
be. Like, think about it. It's generally you don't see that much impact on the opening side from Captain Kirka, despite them needing it sometimes to win games. Could you
yeah,
then go look for a Kenszor type of replacement there? Like it's something to consider. Like
yeah,
it's definitely an option.
yeah. Right, my pick. I went for Dumao, who we I seem to remember this guy came up when we talked about like our prospect of the year or something like that, and like it was we had debates about who could reasonably be considered a prospect and who could not. I'm gonna decide to pick him. He's a young player who has played a LAN event on a sub-notable team. I think Legacy are very much on the fringes of what I would consider like the top layer of the Brazilian scene. But
Sure.
they have a very strong core. They have very strong players, and Dumao is one of those who has been around for like 4 years. Legacy this week they finished third in their group in ESL Challenger Katowice. They started off by winning a derby game against MIBR, which is honestly it's the best of one, but that's a decent scap to take, especially like considering the addition of Lukowski was supposed to make this MIBR team like a proper tier 1 team after having like decent success, even without him. But they started with that win. They dropped down after losing to Pain. That's honestly a closer game than the MIBR game was. They put up a decent fight. And then they take a map off of Monty, and they do that almost solely on the opponent's map pick because of Duma. Because for these first two maps, he was 171 rated for both of them, and nobody else on his team was doing jack shit. And it wasn't like there was an equivalent carry on the other team. Like they were just playing a decent game. Then third map they get 13-1, so they end up losing, but made a good fight of it. Like
Yeah.
overtime on the first map, second map they win 13-6. That's a good fight. Like going into a third map with just those score lines, I would have said Legacy were the favorites to win the game. Like after those first two maps, and that's all Duma. That's all Duma. Then of course they end up losing because the game turns on its head. But yeah, that's a very impressive performance, and it's one of these times that we've seen Duma on LAN. I feel like they don't play a crap ton of LAN because they just play like Legacy just don't really end up in those events. They don't really make it through all of these qualifiers. It might be more smaller events like the CBCS kind of things. They have occasionally made it into like Cologne once. But yeah, that's a very like a 130 LAN rating, taking a win as well against a local rival, pretty big. And like gearing up for the RMR, that's putting Legacy into the conversation where I think they could win. Like they
Hmm.
like or win. They could sneak through. It's all because it's all going to be depending on seeding and stuff. They have a tough game. They have Fury in the first one. But I keep saying this about Swiss stages is that sometimes having a tough game in the first one that you're gonna lose is maybe beneficial because that means out of the likely losers, you probably have the highest seeding. You can get a good matchup for the second one and the third best of one. And then you end up with like two best of three chances to make it through. So they could. So I'm just gonna say, Doom out, good performance. If your teammates can step it up a little bit, then you could be in the major again because this is not the first time this core has been in the major.
Yeah, I'll be curious to find out. I mean, we all know the Dumal story at this point. He's been, as member of Godsent, then 00 Nation, occasionally popping up at events just through Brazilian qualifiers, America's qualifiers, things like that. And
yeah,
he's always been touted as like the next guy for Brazilian Counter-Strike. And, a guy who can do everything. He can open, he can close, he can AWP, he can rifle. He's got solid pistols as well. Always a threat, but never quite being able to find the right mesh of players. And that's been often the case with that sort of layer of Brazilian teams. It's like finding the right combination between veterans and young players, getting the egos right. It's just been a mess. The best person at balancing it realistically has been Big Uzira in terms of like figuring out that sort of mesh between him as a veteran, a couple other like young players as well, getting them integrated. But Dumal's never really been in that situation. He's always had just awkward teams. But no, definitely a talent to keep on watching. A really good week for him individually. Even if the team doesn't go win anything, who cares? He played really well. And yeah, a solid pick and one to look out for. But that wraps up our show. It's been a good 2 hours.
another classic.
Another classic. I mean, over half an hour spent just talking about movies, as you would on a Counter-Strike show. So yeah,
Some of the most fun we've had on this show, though, to be honest.
Yeah, leave us commenting as your favorite movies or why ours are technically terrible. You're wrong, but that's okay. Please leave a comment.
Best Cars movie, like Pixar Cars. Which is the best one? 1, 2, or 3? I need to settle a debate with my girlfriend. I need to. Yeah, I need your answers.
Hang on, you said it was a generational issue. How old's your girlfriend?
Okay, she's 3 years younger. She's 3 years younger. But okay, like other people as well. We have tried to settle this question before, and like, yeah.
We'll find out what everyone else thinks. And yeah, sub if you want to see more, become a member if you want access to behind the scenes content, extra demo reviews, and all this other good stuff. All right, that's all for this one. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.